When I'm driving an F1 car, steering wheel feedback is one of the most important things. It helps me decide when to brake and how hard. It's how I feel the surface of the road. Every bump in the terrain, every wheel slip. If my tyres are starting to lose grip, I can sense that immediately. When I'm driving in a sim, I need that same tactility, that level of detail I have in a real car.
Racing games have come a long way in the last 20 years. Nothing's really changed in how we approach force feedback in all that time. Cutting-edge sims are now so realistic, drivers across all disciplines are using them for training. Our main goal when designing Trueforce was to improve the number of sensations that you actually feel, to put you better in contact with the car that you're driving so that you can improve your performance and that enjoyment of driving on a track. The physical feedback needs to be more immediate or accurate, or a player loses immersion or control.
Game developers are still having to recreate their force feedback from a set library of effects instead of deriving it from real-time modelling.
Trueforce is special because it levels the playing field for PC and console gamers. You're now getting the extra level of precision and detail that you need, regardless of which platform is your choice. This is not just iteration, it's total evolution. Trueforce force feedback works differently. It hooks directly into the physics engine of the game. Games already calculate the forces on the tyres and the steering wheel. The Trueforce algorithm is able to process this data at up to 4,000 times a second. It will even use the game's audio engine and pass it directly on to the driver.
We spend a lot of time as audio designers trying to make each car sound unique and as realistic as we possibly can. Being able to integrate the audio into the force feedback is something that we've wanted to do for a long time, and Trueforce enables us to do that. And the ability to send the audio to the wheel, to have it respond and vibrate with the loss of traction, really increases my ability to give that immersion to the player.
You can sense the changing surface of the road. You'll be able to feel if the back end of the car is losing grip.
The first time we had it running in the build, I could feel the wheel humming and vibrating as we revved the engine. Our immediate reaction was it really adds another level of immersion.
The first thing you're going to feel with a Trueforce wheel is the engine note. The minute the engine starts in the game, you will know exactly which car you are driving. Trueforce is the beginning of something new. This is now the foundation for all wheels that we'll produce in the future. This extra level of information gives everyone all the information they need to learn how to control their car better. Trueforce benefits any racing fan looking for a more realistic driving experience.
Because winning is all about feeling.
Last year, a new dawn came upon us. This year, we know exactly what to expect. Drama, endless action, agony, and ecstasy. After the huge success of our first year in 2022, we are back again, bigger and better. New drivers, new teams, and a new focus. How will the defending champion Jared Filsell go this year? And who will be his challengers? Will one of the new names stand out? Teams like 9-5 are so much stronger, as are others. The grid is full of drivers who had to fight their way through the qualifying series just to get on the grid to race against those 20 survivors from last year. Last year's opening race here at Sebring gave us the most amazing finish that we can remember. Will Brady Myers be able to repeat that effort again tonight? Welcome back to the 2023 Logitech G Pro Invitational Series, and welcome to our many viewers to what looks like is going to be a very windy turn-in Apparel Sebring sprint. With me to cover all the action tonight is Lockie Mansell and Stephen Sandman Clark. Guys, it's great to see you again. Lockie, it's awesome to have you on board this year. How much are you looking forward to this? I know I am super excited to see how this race will pan out.
I am absolutely pumped, Cass. Good evening to you. Good evening to Stephen Sandman Clark. Good evening, everybody, wherever you're tuning in right around the world. Welcome to round number 1 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational Series, the turn-in race apparel Sebring sprint. We head over to Florida in the United States of America to a circuit, Sandman, that produced one of the most epic, enthralling finishes we saw right throughout last year's series.
Yeah, good evening, Lockie. Good evening, everyone. Boy, are you right. Like, we set the bar for round 1 last year. We didn't know what we had in store for our series, but man, oh man, did we kick a massive goal for round number 1. Sebring really turned it on, and I don't think anyone is going to get that finish anytime soon.
No, for those of you who might need your memories of being jogged, what happened was that we had, with 4 laps to go, the cars of Jared Filsell and Jake Burton battling it out for the race lead, but they were so focused on racing one another for track position that the 3 cars behind caught up on the last lap and left us with this amazing blockbuster finish where we had 5 cars nose to tail dicing for position, swapping places multiple times in the last half a lap. On the run to the finish line, Jake Burton ran out of fuel, handing Brady Myers a dramatic race victory in the last 50 metres.
It was incredible, wasn't it? I mean, you listen to the call, and I'm calling that Burton won the race. I thought for sure that he had it in the bag, but then obviously the fuel cell goes dry, and then at the end of the day, Brady Myers comes through an unbelievable win. Like, I still go back and watch that, and I still, even though I know how it's going to play out, I still go back and look at it and still can't believe how it plays out.
Yeah, and yourself and Jake Blackhall going absolutely nuts in commentary. We will be hearing Jake Blackhall's tones back on commentary throughout the series. Unfortunately, he's away with some other commitments tonight, but he will be back. We had the qualifying series to kick things off, so drivers who finished outside the top 20 in last year's series standings had to participate in a 4-event qualifying series just to earn themselves a spot on the grid for this year. And that qualifying series gave us a bit of a preview, I think, of what we can expect throughout this season. And also, I think it probably shone the light on a few rising stars of the Aussie sim racing scene. So obviously Dylan Rudd won the series, but there are a couple of other drivers that popped onto our radar, including a very young driver by the name of Rehan Leonage, who took the fight up to some much older and more experienced drivers, and really looking forward to seeing what young Rehan can do in the main game.
Absolutely. I know you're not supposed to have favourites in this series as a commentator. The boys at TTR are going to be probably a little bit annoyed at me, but Rehan, he's my favourite for the moment. Like, it was incredible to watch him go through that qualifying series and see how fast he was. He's got natural talent. He's quick. He's young. I think these guys have got something to worry about as this season goes on.
Indeed they do, so looking forward to seeing his progress and a few other good performances as well. So the likes of Rick Kuznetsov, Brad Ratu got a win at Sandown as well in the qualifying series, so looks like he's made some improvements compared to last year. But of course, all of the talk's going to be about the big guns, the main players, the drivers who battled it out for the championship last year. And of course, it's Jared Filsell, the reigning series champion, who comes back with the coveted #1 plate to try and defend his title.
He did it in style too, didn't he? I mean, he really took it to a next level, and it was just a chasing game for everyone. I know there's one person that'll be grateful to be on grid tonight, and that's Madison Down. Of course, we touched on that he missed actually this round last year because unfortunately he had a power blackout. So he spent pretty much the entire year chasing down Jared Filsell, and unbelievably so, that missing that first round, he still managed to get second in the championship. So no doubt he'll be rapt to be on the grid tonight, and actually a level playing field coming into tonight to see how he can go about having a crack at this championship.
It's about to get very busy on track because qualifying is underway, and those of you who joined us for the qualifying series might recall that at each of the 4 rounds we split qualifying up into a pair of 15-minute sessions for the top and bottom 50% of the field. Not the case tonight. It's all of the cars in the field all out on the track at once for a single 20-minute qualifying session. So you would have to say, Sandman, that traffic management is going to be absolutely critical.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Look, while we've got him on camera too, look, there he is. There's Rihan. He's behind the controls too, so that's a great view. So blessed to have some of these camera views for our broadcast this year. But absolutely, I mean, we talk about traffic and managing that in qualifying each and every round, but you really want to start the season as clean as you can. You don't want to have any hiccups because you start behind the 8 ball. So there you can see what Rihan's doing. He's just trying to slow down, let these cars around him just go. They know they've got a 20-minute session. It's always the key to about probably getting down a banker. Put down that banker lap, and then you can see about pushing later on.
Looking at Brenton Hobson in the Synergy Sim Racing ZB Commodore, one of the great characters of the sim racing scene is Hobbo. Good to have him back in the field this year. Other drivers to look out for. We've talked about Jared Filsell. We've talked about Madison Down. I think Andrew Gilliam, you'd have to say that he's going to be one of the main contenders. Brady Myers obviously was a race winner last year and finished in the top 3 in the standings. Luke Rosella was one of the more impressive drivers in last year's series as well and ended up finishing in the top 5, and you can never count out the likes of Josh Anderson and Jake Burhan. They're always very quick.
Crazy, isn't it? We thought coming into last season that we had the best of the best, and then of course, like we mentioned earlier, that qualifying series cut out the top 20, put them permanently in the series, and then everyone had to race in to make the rest of the field. So, you know, if people were going to say last year's field was tough, this year's going to be much tougher.
Looking at James Scott in the number 088 Synergy Sim Racing entry. He's been a fairly consistent front runner in Australian sim racing for the last couple of seasons. Very good evening to those of you tuning in on the live stream, which is going out on multiple channels this evening. It's obviously going out on the Australian Sim Racing Group YouTube channel, the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series Facebook page, and I believe on some of the Motorsport Australia channels as well. So a very good evening to everybody who's tuning in, whatever platform of choice you are tuning in on. It's Stephen Sandman Clark alongside myself, Lockie Mansell, in commentary right throughout the evening. And in this qualifying session, I think generally the pattern that we saw in qualifying for the qualifying series as opposed to the main series is that you get a couple of runs on a couple of sets of tyres. I think this being a 20-minute session, we might see up to 3 runs, but it is quite a long circuit, 5.87 Ks, and the lap times are just above the 2-minute mark. So it is a fairly long lap here.
I do love the way qualifying plays out with the mindset for these drivers and teams, you know, that they'll work out, you know, how they're going to go. Sometimes some people will sit in the pit lane for a little bit and try to get a little bit of that free track position because they don't want to have any congestion in front of them. So I really love in this qualifying session to see how it's all going to play out.
You are right, because one of the regulations for the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series is that there is a no escape rule in effect for qualifying. So if you have an incident on track and damage your car, you can't just escape back to the pits. You have to actually limp the car back to pit lane, which obviously costs you a lot of time, both in the process of getting back to pit lane and then having your car repaired. So a bit of conservatism and a bit of caution is probably not such a dumb idea in a session, especially in a session with as much congestion as this one.
It's funny, isn't it? I know all these teams and drivers are pros now about as far as trying, you know, not using that escape rule, but when it's new to you, you don't realise how much time that actually takes out of a 20-minute session when you find yourself going back to the garage, putting on a new set of tyres and then heading out for your outlap. Because, you know, like you said, in a 20-minute session, you might only get 3 good runs on it, and that's if everything goes well.
Indeed. So it's going to have to do be very, very clever. That's where obviously the drivers have all got spotters who will be in communication with them via a Discord channel, not just in the race but in qualifying as well. And once we do get into the race, of course, 44 laps is the distance tonight, which is just under 260k, so it is quite a long race. There will be 2 compulsory pit stops, so having that spotter in play to manage strategy, work out the optimum time to come into the pits, work out how much fuel you take on board during each of your pit stops. That's the other very important aspect of strategic race management.
You see the onboard camera there was Stenny just a moment ago. He was having a good old time, wasn't he? Laughing and enjoying himself. So it's good to see he's relaxed as we're 6 minutes into this qualifying session. And it's good to see that Madison Down, after like we spoke about just before, that it's a bounce back for him. He didn't get to race this round, and straight away he's gone to the top of the timesheets.
Indeed, he has ahead of James Scott just on Kurt Stenberg. It's a bit different to the Kurt Stenberg that we saw in the qualifying series, where he was quite stressed for a lot of that series because he had a couple of bad results, and even heading into the last round at Bathurst, there was a bit of pressure on to make sure that he scored a good enough result to earn himself a spot in the main series. So good to see that the pressure's off Stenny tonight. He can get out there and have fun.
I was going to have a go at his driving style because I think he actually gripped the steering wheel in the centre. I'm like, what is he doing there? Obviously, he was on his cool-down lap heading back to the lane. So, yeah, but quite a character. It was good to see him at Bathurst. You know, he's giving it the whip. He was trying to get as fast as he could. He had his head down, and a unique driving style that we touched on. But it's good to see, again, like having these cameras for our broadcast, just to see behind the scenes is really good.
So some of the big hitting teams in sim racing represented at the top of the timesheets at the moment. Madison Down for Trans-Tasman Racing. We've got, in fact, 2 Trans-Tasman and 3 Synergy sim racing cars inside the top 5. Also in the mix, Andrew Gilliam for Pursuit Sim Racing, Ethan Grigolt for the Evolution Racing team, Job Stewart for Pursuit Sim Racing, and one of the teams that's been on the rise, you would have to say, the 9-5 Sim Sport team, and definitely Rick Kuznetsov was one of their star performers in the qualifying series.
Absolutely, yeah. That was a name that we said a lot through that series, wasn't it? And I think it's probably something we're going to be touching on more throughout this season as well. And I think that's the beauty of this championship, that we're seeing some new names and some new teams coming to the fold too. I think that's absolutely brilliant and makes for an absolute cracking season, because you look at the times and you look at the names and you look at the teams and you think, yeah, you could probably put it down in pen and paper and you could probably work it out. But there's going to be some surprise packets this year, and that's what I really can't wait to see, exactly how this plays out, especially after round 1.
So we were talking about the fact that some drivers might be patient. They might be content to wait it out in pit lane. And one driver who has yet to record a time in this session is Josh Anderson, who's currently, well, effectively 43rd on the timesheet. So he has elected just to wait a little while for some of the chaos to die down before he goes out to try and set a fast lap time.
We're just hearing from our stewards. It looks like he's got a rear of grid penalty, so that's why he's sitting out. That's why he's sitting out qualifying. So, yes, unfortunately, but nevertheless, it's a long season. If you're going to get a penalty, hey, may as well be round number 1, won't it? Because you know you've got a long way to bounce back. You know, no one ever wants a penalty, but at the end of the day, it's only round 1, and a lot's going to happen over this year.
Yeah, and apparently that penalty is from Phillip Island last year, so it's not like you finish one season and then you start with a clean sheet. The penalties do actually carry over, and I think that's not a bad thing because it discourages people from being over-enthusiastic, shall we say, in the last round of the season. But anyway, that sets up some entertainment for us tonight, doesn't it? We'll get to watch Josh Anderson charging through from the rear of the field aboard his Trans-Tasman racing machine.
Geez, talk about entertainment. Look at this on the back stretch. Look at everyone. This is dangerous because there's drivers still ready to start their lap, but no one wants to go first. I think people want to get a bit of a tow and a draft, but man, that was messy when there's 4 or 5 cars wide and you've got fast guys approaching on slower guys. That's a little bit tricky at the start of that lap.
And like you said, pretty dangerous as well. It was lucky that we didn't have an incident there, because there were a few drivers who looks like they were on hot laps and they arrived to find a fair percentage of the field virtually stationary in that section of the circuit on the back straight. So, like you say, there is a bit of an advantage to be gained by slipstreaming the car in front, particularly on this circuit. And it looks like in that case, nobody really wanted to go first. Bit reminiscent of some of the scenes that we've seen at Monza in Formula One over the years.
Absolutely. And now we touched on, look at that, we're already past the 10-minute mark in this 20-minute session, and most of the drivers have only done one lap. So, you know, them playing those cat and mouse games on the back straight, coming to a stop sometimes, just trying to let traffic through, that's just eating into this time, and they're slowly running out of that. So they want to be mindful. I guess the guys at the top haven't got too much to worry about because they've actually banked a decent lap. But the people a little bit further down the track, they don't want to be playing games like that because they can't afford to give up that crucial time.
So Madison down at the moment, still on top of the timesheets. 2:01 dead, his lap time in the session so far. James Scott second on a 2:01.2. Brady Myers is third, and then it's Luke Rosella, our reigning series champ. Jared Fuelsell in fifth position at the moment, back to Andrew Gilliam. Ethan Grigolf in seventh. Marcello Rivera, Job Stewart and Rick Kuznetsov rounding out the top 10.
So just trying to find, there's a couple of drivers that had a little bit of off track. I saw on the timesheets that Jake Maloney, that lit up that he had a bit of an off track there. So that's at a point where if you just start going and you're into your hot lap and you have an off track, it's basically just roll out of it, try and save those tyres and go again. So yeah, that's you can see some of the congestion. There's a car off onto the grass as well. So just doing their best absolutely just to get out of the way. I don't know if the outside on the grass is probably the best option. I might have gone to the inside myself.
Let's down that back straight, Ullman straight, heading into the corner that we describe as Sunset Bend, turn number 17, which is a long corner. And it has sort of almost a triple apex sort of corner. So the lines that you can take through it are varied depending on whether you're attacking or defending. But you do have to be careful at the initial turn in because the wall juts out. So you have to be careful not to turn in too early, or you can clip that wall and it will fire you across to the outside of the circuit.
It's a unique racetrack too, isn't it, Lockie? Because there's so many different surfaces. There's concrete, there's bumps, there's tarmac. Like, you really do get a taste of everything at this racetrack. And the thing that we noticed too is that last time we were here, iRacing gave this place a little bit of a facelift, just with some of the externals and everything. So the track is looking great. It's an awesome racetrack to race at, but certainly does make the most of you as a driver, just because of the different road surfaces that you've got to deal with.
And one of the reasons it is such an awesome racetrack is because most of the track is very, very wide. So it sets up the opportunity to take alternate lines through different corners and hence create overtaking opportunities. And I think that was fairly graphically demonstrated in the race that we had last year. Let's hope we get another thriller like that tonight to kick off the 2023 season.
Absolutely. I don't know if my heart's got it in it, to be honest. But let's hope if it does happen, I get the call right this time and don't call the wrong driver across the start-finish line.
So watching Ethan Grigolf in the Evolution Racing team, car number 7 in position number 7 at the moment. And they really fire it across that curb there, don't they?
Absolutely. Speaking with teams of that throughout the year, it's like, you know, it's amazing how some of these teams will get these cars set up as far as using the curbs and how they want their car to behave too, because the last thing you want, especially around here, about talk about how bumpy it was, you don't want a car that won't take on those curves nicely, because if you get a car that's way too aggressive, you know, it's just going to make your night a nightmare.
Looking at young Rehan Leonage, he's got a handy sim setup there. One of the drivers for the Pursuit Sim Racing team, so gets to benefit from the experience of the likes of Andrew Gilliam in his sim racing progression. He's currently sitting in position 15 on the timesheet, so a very good effort from young Rehan so far in this session.
Absolutely. Brilliant camera shot too, because it's telling you, it just shows you how much wheel work he's doing, his position and the way he's got the car set up. So good on him. I'm really keen to see how he goes, and to be in the top 15 at the moment, that's it's a pretty impressive effort.
So getting into the dying 5 minutes of this session. Madison Down still the fastest driver. Interesting to say that, like you alluded to before, most of the drivers haven't completed a whole lot of flying laps at this stage, and the best times that we've seen from most of the drivers were set fairly early in the session.
Yeah, and we talk about that too sometimes with, when the amount of cars that are on track, sometimes the temperature plays a part in it. These cars don't like it when it gets too hot and slippery. So, it could be the fact that these guys were just having a red hot go. Oh, look at this congestion here too. How crazy is this? It can be a little bit off-putting too, especially, thankfully we know we're not at a point where we don't have any faster cars coming on the racetrack. It looks like everyone's pretty much on their outlap, but we know that there are other guys on different parts of the racetrack. They need to be very careful, and that's where the teams will come into it too, because these drivers do have spotters and they have race engineers that help them in the background. Some people will be surprised about that, but it actually does happen. So as long as they're in communication with the drivers to let them know they haven't got... See, look at this. There's a car down the back. He's flashing his lights. He's off onto the grass, and that's ruined his lap. So if he was on a hot lap, I don't know who that was. There it is there. Unbelievable. Mitchison. That's exactly what I was just about to say, is these teams really need to be on the radio to let these guys know that you've got faster cars coming. As we check out the replay, you actually see he was actually on the lights too. He's flashing away because he saw all this traffic coming. But look at this, absolutely nowhere to go. No one's looking in their mirrors. He's off onto the grass. Lucky not to dive it into the wall, because obviously we touched on before, there's no escape rule. So if he had had massive damage, that would have been his session over.
Yeah, that'll be a huge frustration for him because, like you said, he was on a hot lap. And look at this. This is actually getting a bit silly now, some of this congestion. I get that the drivers want to try and get the advantage of the slipstream from the car in front, but is it really worth the risk of damaging your car? That's the first question that you have to ask. And I think the second point is, yes, you might get a bit of an advantage from the toe, but you can get held up through the corners as well and have your lap ruined that way.
Absolutely, and I know the race stewards, they'll be looking at this too. So you talk about, you don't want to impede someone, you don't want to get damage to your car, but you don't want to get a penalty for it too. You don't want to be rolling around, not paying attention, looking in your mirrors, and then balk someone else's race or their race run, or their quali run, I should say, and then get a penalty, because that's just, that stuff really doesn't need to happen. So hopefully they'll be a little bit more mindful of that as the season goes on.
So out of all that, Madison down still at the top of the timesheets, and we've got 2.5 minutes remaining in this session. So this will be the last flying lap completed by just about everyone, as we've got more congestion on the back straight. Drivers winding up, getting ready to go for their flying lap. Let's hope we can get to the end of this session cleanly and everybody does at least get an opportunity to go for one final flying lap without any damage or traffic interruptions. There's a car in the background that's clearly on a hot lap, and you can see they've got the lights flashing. Here is Jared Filsell, our reigning series champion, coming through to get his final flying lap underway. And he's got no cars in front of him.
Yeah, it's amazing just how everyone's battling for that bit of free air, and some people want the draft, but Jared's sort of the type of guy where he's pretty happy with his pace, and he's not too worried about having someone in front of him to push the air around. So, but we can see there's a couple of TTR cars here. They're all sort of teaming up to see if they can use the draft on each other. They're giving each other a little bit of real estate too, which is good, because you don't know what the driver in front is going to do. You may be able to close that gap up a little bit. So if you're using that advantage of the toe, you do want some space between each other, and that's exactly what the TTR guys have got, because it gives them that little bit of real estate if they are on a faster lap than the car in front.
So business end of the qualifying session with 1 minute and 10 seconds remaining on the clock, and this could be one of these qualifying sessions where we see the fastest times after the checkered flag has actually fallen. All depends on whose times their run to the checkered flag the best, who's got a fresh set of tyres, who's got themselves in the right track position to maybe get a bit of an advantage from the slipstream, but not to the extent that they're going to lose time through the corners. Marcello Rivera sitting in 8th position at the moment. We look back to Dylan Rudd, the winner of our qualifying series, who currently sits just outside the top 10 in 11th position.
Just trying to have a look quick down the times. It doesn't look like anyone's setting the world on fire as such. So I think with Madison down, he's got himself a couple of tenths up his sleeve. So I think he'd be fairly happy at this stage, as we'll see Rudd move up to 4th place.
And Rivera up to 2nd. So now we are starting to see some improvements. Ethan Grigalt moves up to 8th position. Here comes Jared Filsell. He's currently in position 4. Can he improve? The checkered flag flies now, so Filsell will not get another lap in. He moves up 1 spot to 3rd. Rosella goes 2nd and gets to within 7/100th of a second of Madison Down. Job Stewart up into the top 5. James Scott up to 2nd and goes within 5/100ths of Madison Down. So it has become very close at the top of the timesheets.
How lucky is it Down that had that 2/10 up his sleeve, because thankfully he might be able to breathe easy regardless of what this lap is. He's still on a hot one here, but boy oh boy did it get close in those dying stages. That was incredible. Car looks good. He's coming out of that final turn. I think he can breathe easy now. I don't know that he's got too much to worry about. He might hold on. Has he improved his time? No.
Richard Hampstead and also Jake Burton improving their times on the final lap, but positions 12 and 13 respectively. Jake Burton will be a bit disappointed with that. I think you would have expected him to be a lot higher up the order than that, considering he was one of the drivers fighting it out for the race victory here last year.
And Burton with his new team too. He's joined the ranks of TTR in the off season. So yeah, I think there was probably a little bit of a bit of a shock that we probably didn't see him up a little bit higher. But nevertheless, 13's not too bad. He still can fight from there. It's not too bad at all.
That's an interesting grid, isn't it? So Madison Down, probably not a huge surprise to see him on pole position, but inside the top 10, it's a few good performances. Luke Rosell, a 3rd spot for him. I mentioned that he was one of the very strong performers last year. He's up inside the top 3. That's a good effort. Job Stewart, good to see him back in sim racing, competing in real life in the Dunlop Super 3 series as well. He sits in 6th position. Dylan Rudd, our qualifying series winner, 7th. And Brady Myers, Tom Freer, Ethan Griggolt rounding out the top 10. Like I said, Jake Burton a bit further back than we'd expect in 13th position. Having a look down the field to see if there's any other performers that we would have expected to be a bit further up. Jake Maloney down in 20th spot. And further down the field, Thomas Hinds all the way back in 39th position. And as we've already discussed, Josh Anderson to start the race at the rear of the grid due to the carryover penalty from the end of the last season.
Well, that was it, wasn't it, Lockie? A quick 20 minutes, and that gets us underway for round number 1. Like, that was, man, right at the end. You called it too, didn't you? You said, towards the end, it's going to be that last lap, and that's when it got very close for Madison Down with all those other drivers nipping at his heels, but managed to hold on and get the job done.
So there we go, confirmation of your qualifying results for round 1 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational A-Series, the Sebring Sprint. Brought to you by Turn-In Race Apparel, and also brought to you by Motorsport Australia. A very good evening once again to everybody tuning in tonight on the Motorsport Australia live stream platforms, as well as the Australian Sim Racing Group YouTube channel and the Logitech G Pro Invitational A-Series Facebook page. So very shortly, Sandman, we're going to have the cars gridding up, but we're going to go for a walk and have a chat to some of the drivers on the starting grid before we get tonight's 44-lap race underway.
Incredible quali series, wasn't it? I mean, just to 20 minutes, you just never know how it's going to play out. And this place is so different as far as the bumps that we talked about. I'm really keen to see who's actually going to just maybe run away from it, whether they've got, the race that their package that they exactly want, whether their car's working for them. We're really interested to see how it's all going to play out over the next 44 laps. And that's a decent race distance in itself.
Indeed it is, and we've seen the 1 lap pace from all of the drivers, but now we throw in the variables of tyres and pit stop strategy and refueling and traffic management and the possibility of safety cars and all of the other variables that you do get once we go racing. But let's have a chat to the driver who has taken pole position tonight from the Trans-Tasman Racing Team. It's a very good evening to Madison Down. Madison, congratulations. Pole position for round 1 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational A-Series. That was a very busy qualifying session. How did you go managing the traffic?
Yeah, to be honest, pretty good with the traffic. Managed to get the lap done on the first flyer, and then from there tried to tow teammates, but didn't really eventuate. But yeah, overall the 40 cars at this track wasn't too bad because it's such a long lap. But yeah, really happy. I missed this round last year due to a power outage, so making sure that I put the thing up the front of the field and put the best foot forward for the race tonight.
In terms of how you time your run in qualifying, is there much of an advantage to be gained by having somebody to draft, or are you better being on your own and having the advantage of clear track?
Yeah, tough one because it's so much faster in the tow on the long straights here, but you lose a bit in braking performance with the aero just being taken off the front of the car a little bit. So I found on my first lap there, I had a good tow on that opening lap. I'm lost about 2 or 3 tenths in the corners, but I made about 4 tenths back on the straights. So it's a bit of a trade-off. It's just tricky because you don't practice all week in the draft, so it's easy to lock tyres, but yeah, happy to get the job done.
Obviously, you've got the 1 lap speed for qualifying, but how's your race package looking this evening?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I'm confident we've got a decent race car. Hard to know what the other teams have got underneath them, and I don't really have as much of a form guide with not doing this round last year, so it tends to be a happy hunting ground, Sebring, for me, so hopefully we can get off to a good start here. I think strategy and tyre degradation, though, is going to be really the big key to this race. So, yeah, really hot day at Sebring in the sim, so we'll see whether we can keep the tyres on it. But, yeah, pace is good, just a matter of not overdriving.
All right, you've got 44 laps ahead of you. Go well tonight.
Thanks, Lockie.
And joining Madison down on the front row of the grid will be James Scott, and he is with Sandman.
James, congratulations. Heck of a lap, mate. And by the closest of margins, it's not a bad effort. I think you'd be pretty happy with P2, wouldn't you?
Yeah, mate. Can't complain with a front row start for the first race of the year. Didn't really know what to expect heading into the round. Obviously, first round of the series. Didn't compete last year, so yeah, can't complain with a P2.
How was the prep coming into this Sebring? Obviously, you probably would have watched some of the racing from throughout the year. What do you sort of think to expect coming into this season?
Yeah, obviously the best guys in the country in the series, so it's obviously going to be hard and fast racing. But tonight, yeah, I'm just going to play it by ear, see what happens, and hopefully keep the tyres on it and stay out of trouble.
Without giving too much away, if you got sort of some sort of mindset of how you think you want the race to play out? I mean, obviously, there's so many variables with the way the race plays out, whether there's drama, whether there's safety cars. Have you got sort of a bit of a mindset of how you think your race might play out?
I don't really do that sort of stuff because your race can sort of be turned on your head if you get a bad start or something. So I sort of just play it by ear, assess where you are at the end of the first lap, and then sort of develop a plan from there and see where you end up.
Well, congratulations for being part of the grid. Well done, P2. Go get 'em, mate. All the best for the race, and hopefully we're talking to you at the end of the night.
Beauty. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, James. There we go, James Scott. Not a bad place, is it, Lockie, when he starts P2 next to Madison Down? That's not a bad job at all.
Yeah, it's a good front row, that's for sure. I've gone wandering a bit further down the grid, down to position 11, in fact, where I have found Andrew Gilliam in one of the Pursuit Sim racing entries. Andrew, how was that qualifying session, mate?
Oh, it doesn't represent my true pace. On that very last run, I clipped the grass going onto the back straight through Sector 6, dropped the 10th and a half. So I reckon I could have been in that top 5 pack if it weren't for that mistake.
So looking ahead to the race then, you obviously need to now put qualifying behind you and look at how you're going to move forward in the race. Does that change your strategy options, considering that you haven't qualified quite as well as you were expecting?
Yeah, it's not a huge change to the philosophy, but you start to think, all right, am I getting checked up a little bit more than I would if I was in the top 3? You know, is there a breakaway in the top pack somewhere? So things like that can occur when you're just outside the top 10, and maybe we'll have to try an alternative strategy to get some track position back.
Yeah, without giving too much away, but I will ask the question because I'm an investigative journalist and that's what I do. That alternative strategy, could that be stopping earlier than everybody else or maybe running along in the first stint?
Honestly, it just depends on whatever gives you the most clean air over the front of the car.
In other words, what everybody else does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no science to it, I think, especially at a track with a draft this big. It's just going to be a scrap for 44 laps.
All right, well, I'll let you go and discuss your strategic plans with the Pursuit Sim Racing team. Go well tonight.
Thank you.
And wandering a bit further down the grid, down to position number 22, Sandman has found Hayden Veld.
Yeah, Hayden, obviously not one of the best positions to start all the way back here. You got your work cut out for you. How did qualifying go? Obviously, it wasn't the best of results, but you've got plenty of time to make it happen tonight.
Yeah, look, it wasn't exactly what I was hoping for. You know, I got a good drive from Jared, and then just drove like a bit of a mullet, and sort of threw away a good lap there. Could have been well inside the 10. But I don't know, from here, I guess just try and stay out of the mess, move my way up.
Yeah, we talk about that, don't we? It's like when you qualify down the pack, it's all about eyes forward, isn't it? Because you just don't know how or what's going to unfold in front of you. I guess the good thing you can take away from that is that you said you had a decent lap, but just made a mess of it. So if the car's good, that gives you a bit of faith for the race then.
Yeah, it does a bit, but it's, you know, it's a long way back, and it's going to be hard to make it through this field with, you know, you got such good drivers in here, and it's not like they're going to make mistakes and fall off the road, so it's going to be a little bit harder than what I wanted it to be, but we'll see how we go.
Well, 44 laps, mate. Plenty of time to bounce back. You never know. Safety cars might play out. Is that something what you and the team have possibly talked about, with the fact there might be a safety car pitting early or going longer?
It's definitely a possibility. You know, we haven't really talk too much about strategy because obviously it changes so much in the race, but you know, you never know what can happen, so we'll see.
Well, Hayden, we'll let you get back to it. You concentrate for the start. All the best. Stay out of trouble with those first couple laps, mate, and hopefully we're talking to you at the end of the night.
Thank you.
Cheers, Hayden. There you go, Lockie, mate. You know, all these guys, regardless of where you start, first or last, I mean, they'd just be thrilled to be on the grid.
Indeed they would. We have had to dash off the grid very, very quickly because we are just about set for a race start here. It is round one of the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series. It's the Sebring Sprint. It's brought to you by Motorsport Australia. A very good evening once again to everybody tuning in on the live stream. Last year we had an absolutely epic race here at Sebring. Let's see if we can get a similar epic entertaining display tonight. 44 laps the distance, 2 compulsory pit stops to be taken by each driver in the field. So there's going to be different strategies playing out throughout the evening. There's going to be tyre management, there's going to be traffic management, there's going to be different fuel strategies, and we've got some of the best sim racing drivers in Australia set to go racing. Green flag waves. We are underway for the 2023 Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series, and it's a very, very good start from Madison Down from pole position, slipping into second position. James Scott on the inside holds on to P number 2. We've got cars running 2 and 3 wide through that long left-hander at turn number 1. They all make it through the first corner cleanly.
It's always hold your breath through that corner, isn't it? At the start of this race, you've got so many competitive cars, everyone having a red-hot go. The tyres aren't obviously up to temperature, but everyone's managed to have a nice, clean start. That's exactly what we wanted to see in the opening lap here at Sebring.
Good racing room and respect shown by all of the drivers on that opening lap, but you can already see a bit further back in the mid-pack, a few drivers just moving to the inside and maybe a little bit of contact. There is.
Oh, no, it looks like it was in front of the field too. Hopefully they managed to get away with it. We didn't quite see where the car ended up. A little bit of nose-to-tail contact. The car got sideways. Just hopefully it didn't go right in front of the field.
There's some very good evasive action there from some of the drivers to avoid that spinning car. Madison Down cleanly through. James Scott has actually been relegated back a spot by Luke Rosella, so Rosella was able to move up into second position ahead of Scott, and is attacking the back of Madison Down. Looking very good on cold tyres is Luke Rosella, and he puts the pressure on Down as they head towards the second half of this opening lap.
Yeah, the pace that he's got on board for this first lap, he's probably keen to get as close as he can down this back straightaway and use that draft advantage as much as he can. He probably feeds himself that he'd like to be in front of Madison Down. I know it's only the first lap, but they're all looking very racy. He's got a little bit of a toe, but look at that. Well, I think he rolled out of the throttle and he's already starting to think about possibly saving fuel.
Yeah, well, we saw it at Bathurst in the qualifying series, didn't we? And I'm sure we'll see it again tonight, particularly in the early stages. You don't necessarily want to be up the front too early, because if you can sit in the draft and save fuel, it will give you a strategic advantage a bit later on. It looks like that's already on Luke Rosella's mind.
It's actually not a bad mindset too. You've got one of the best drivers in the country, Madison Down. He's obviously won his fair share of races. So if you find yourself at lap 1 right behind, tucked in underneath, that's not a bad position to be. We see cars sideways throwing through the corner. Looks like a lot of give and take there. That was good. Oh, the car sideways though. Didn't quite catch out who that was. Looks like Taliancic was sideways, I think, just in that corner.
It's so congested in the mid-pack, isn't it? And such as the level of competition in this field, every position is going to be very hotly contested. Taliancic battling it out with Brad Rattu. It looks like Jordan Ross, who's a bit further down the order in one of the Synergy sim racing entries, looking to make up spots. And Robert Gibbs was involved in that contest as well. It's still not resolved. Rattu, Taliancic side by side. And Jordan Ross gets hung out to dry there. That was Kurt Stenberg, I think, getting down his inside.
I think I spoke a little bit early, didn't I? I think I said that it was nice to see everyone got away clean, but it's just doing a little bit of bump and grind in this last half a lap. I noticed one of the cars a little bit further down the field was missing a bonnet too, so whether that had drama... Oh, look at all these cars there, side by side through, off onto the grass. Oh, it's going to get close up here over the curbs. Oh, these guys really need to give each other a bit of room.
So far, I think they're giving each other just enough room. Maybe not. That's Brad Rattu who gets run off the road out into the grass there. And a few drivers just having to come out of the throttle to make sure that they didn't rear-end the car in front. There is the car missing the bonnet. It's one of the Evolution Racing Team cars. The car that's currently in behind Jordan Ross. Jack Boyd, I think that is.
Wow, how much has this stepped up? I mean, this is only lap 2 of 44. This is only round 1 of the series. But boy, oh boy, they're all giving it to each other. They're all having a red-hot go. It's unreal.
Correction, it's actually Matthew Bowler who has the missing bonnet there, but one driver not having to worry about that level of congestion at the moment is Madison Down, our race leader, because he has clear track in front. He continues to lead the way ahead of Luke Rosella. They fan out. They almost go 3 wide there into turn number 1, but Madison Down shuts the door. I've noticed as well that Brady Myers has moved up to 3rd ahead of Marcello Rivera. The big loser, James Scott, he started on the front row of the grid, but he's been shuffled back to position number 5 after the opening 2 laps.
Yeah, good move by Brady Myers, isn't it? Like I said, up 5 positions from the start of the race. So he's just finding himself in a position where he's just slowly picking them off one at a time. And of course, who has he got up front leading? That's one of his teammates. So those guys got a bit of a plan. Oh, 84, he's around Sebastian Flock. Car pointing around the wrong direction, so he's got that fired up. Didn't quite catch what happened there. Oh, more side-by-side action here too. So we'll have to maybe try and catch a bit of a replay. But Brady Myers, he's got his work cut out for him going for P2. Oh, this is close.
And it's allowed Madison Down to pull away. So in the blink of an eye, Luke Rosella's fallen back to position number 4. And there's contact between Brady Myers and Marcello Rivera. It's Myers who manages to grab the spot from Rivera. Scott, as I mentioned, has fallen back to 5th position behind Rosella, and you've got a big gaggle of cars, including Ethan Grigault, Jared Filsell, Jake Burton, Andrew Gilliam, and Dylan Rudd, all queued up behind.
Obviously, Myers is very happy with that car. So that's 6 positions now in the first couple of laps. And now he finds himself just right behind his teammate. These guys will probably just try to settle into a bit of a rhythm now. Now that he's got track position, I think he'd be pretty happy just to sit and see how this race starts to play out.
Jake Burton, another driver on the move. He's already come up to 8th position after starting 13th. We mentioned that he didn't qualify anywhere near as well as we expected, but clearly he's got good race pace in his Trans-Tasman racing machine.
That's beautiful about these races too. When they're 44 laps, you can just sort of take your time at the start, get a feel for how the race is playing out, and obviously how that car feels too, because sometimes they'll nail these setups for quick laps, but then they obviously want a decent race car. As we go and check out the replay. Oh, just contact locked up. Oh, it was a concertina effect there, unfortunately. Sebastian tried to check up from the drama in front of him and he got touched from behind.
Indeed he did. That was because there was an incident in front involving, I think it was Brad Rattu and Matthew Bowler coming together, and unfortunately it was just one car into another one, and Sebastian Flock ended up being the worst affected out of that particular incident. Here is a look back to young Rehan Leonage, who currently sits in position 15. He's lost one spot since the start of this race, but having a steady, consistent run so far.
Yeah, and you can see how it's all playing out in front of him too, but that's exactly what he needs to do, is just take his time. He doesn't need to rush this. Well, he's got himself a little bit of a battle though, side by side there with Hobbo. So these guys are going to battle it out, try to give each other racing room, but looks like Rian's going to have the inside line, and actually Hobbo just gives it up. So nice, smart racing from those two.
How good's that though? Young Rehan Leonage battling with one of the most experienced drivers in the field in Brenton Hobson, and like I said, really good respect being shown to one another by both of those drivers. It's still on up the front of the field. That is Jared Filsell getting back down the inside of Ethan Grigault, and Grigault now coming under pressure from Jake Burhan. So it's on here in the battle for positions 6, 7 and 8.
We touched on earlier how that amazing battle last year between Filsell and Burton, they find themselves pretty close together as this race starts to unfold. But the only difference, I guess, now with Burton, now he's at Trans-Tasman Racing, and he finds himself in 8th position. So not too bad. He's just slowly picking them off. 5 positions gained at this stage. I think he'd be pretty happy at the moment.
One of the big things here is how tightly packed this field still is. When you look at the margins between each of the cars in the field, from Madison down back to Brady Myers is 1.2 seconds. That is the biggest gap between any two cars inside the top 24 positions. So it's an extremely tightly packed field, and that is going to make pit strategy all the more important tonight. When do you pit? When do you want to try and maximise clear track, but without putting yourself in a position where you're going to be on inferior tyres to the drivers who you're battling against?
One of the keys I love about racing is just that strategy and how it all plays out. You know, we obviously don't know what's going to happen over the next 30 or 39 odd laps, but, you know, at the end of the day, they can see that the leader is starting to gap a little bit. That sort of helped Madison down, obviously, when those two were fighting with Myers and Rivera back there in the pack. So it's opened up a little bit of a margin. I don't think they'll be too worried at this stage, but he'd be pretty happy with that gap.
And we just saw there that Josh Muggleton is going to cop a 5-second time penalty for contact with Brad Rattu. He had a bit of a fraught run in the qualifying series, didn't he, Josh Muggleton? We saw that he was caught up in all sorts of drama in the final round of the qualifying series at Bathurst, and currently Muggleton sitting in at position 25.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you obviously don't want a penalty, but he'd be thankful he's on the grid for 2023. And we've seen drivers, hey, like our old mate Fernando Alonso bounce back from a 5-second penalty. So hopefully Jared could put that behind him and push on.
Yeah, well, the way that Fernando Alonso bounced back from it was by having his team appeal against it and winning the appeal. I don't know that things are going to go quite that far tonight. We'll look a bit further back in the pack to Richard Hadstead. He's been a long-time campaigner for Trans-Tasman Racing. We've seen that he and Jake Maloney have teamed up and had quite a bit of success, particularly in some of the endurance races in the Australian sim racing scene. But at the moment, Richard Hadstead all the way down in 20th position, so right in the cut and thrust of the mid-pack.
Yeah, not ideal to have that damage too up the side of that Mustang, but nevertheless, still plenty of laps he can push on, maybe repair it a little bit at it in stops, but obviously not ideal, but thankfully most of the car is straight.
Adam Briggs currently sitting in position 15. He was one of the drivers who was in the thick of the action in the qualifying series that we had. And he has come forward 4 positions so far in this race. Just having a look at drivers who've made up a lot of positions. At the moment, the one who's come forward the most spots is Jack Boyd. So he's come up 14 spots, started the race in 40th position and is up to 26th. So he's made very good progress. Conversely, Tom Freer is down 12 positions from where he started. He started the race out of position 9 and he's down to 21st.
Oh, a bit of a dive back here. Is he going to make the job? Oh, don't know if he got it pulled up. He did. Beautiful move there for Gibbs. Just threw in a late dive and got the job done, pulled it up nicely. So gave me a fright, but everything was under control nicely from his point of view.
Oh, here's a switch manoeuvre. That's Luke Mitchison coming under attack from Richard Hadstead, who goes to the outside. Actually, apologies, it's Dylan O'Shea there who gets ahead of Luke Mitchison. We saw, of course, Luke Mitchison having to take that evasive action in the qualifying session when he came across that gaggle of cars that were just about parked at the end of the back straight while he was on his hot lap.
Yeah, I thought that was going to end up in absolute disaster, but he recovered that nicely, and he's find himself up 4 spots now. So, yeah, he's put that behind him now. It's just eyes forward and see what he can get.
Those of you who've just joined us, you are tuning into round number 1 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series. It is the turn-in race Apparel Sebring sprint, 44 laps around at the Sebring circuit in Florida. It's Steve Sandman Clark joining myself and Lockie Mansell in the commentary box to talk you through all of the action. We have just completed lap number 6, and it's Madison Down who leads the race by 1.2 seconds over Brady Myers, Marcello Rivera, Luke Rosella, and Jared Filsell rounding out the top 5.
Interesting to see that margin with Dowd. Like, he's really pushing at the moment. I just wonder how this is playing out when they start thinking about pit stops, because obviously you want to look after these tyres to go the distance. 44 laps and a couple of pit stops. These guys really need to start thinking about how their race is unfolding. And of course, the last thing you want to do is, regardless of how good or bad your car is, you want to look after those 4 round things at the bottom of the race car. Those tyres, they're what gives you, all the pace and what could be the winner over the advantage over the rest of the field.
There is an argument that the best way to control the race, though, is from position number 1. Madison Downs had enough experience and been around for long enough that you'd have to trust his judgment as Richard Hampstead outbrakes himself. He was going for the move there, trying to get down the inside of Dylan O'Shea, but he's outbraked himself, and as a result, he actually loses spots to both Luke Mitchison and Tom Freer. As we look back to Sean McNamara a bit further back in the pack.
Oh, he's on the outside.
No.
A little bit of contact. Oh, managed to hold on to it, though. A little bit of bump and grind there, but managed to get away. Well done. Nice little save there from Sean.
He was involved in a bit of a contretemps there with Hayden Veld, who we spoke to on the grid before the start of the race. Hayden Veld in the Parramatta Isuzu Ute entry. And just banging doors there with Sean McNamara.
Yeah, what do they say? Rubbin's racing, so that's okay. I tell you what, looked a little bit hairy though when he was starting to get a little bit crossed up, but thankfully they all got away with it.
And look at who's behind Hayden Veld. It is Josh Muggleton. And behind Josh Muggleton, Jack Boyd, the hard charger so far in this race, looking to make up some more positions.
What do you think, Lockie? You reckon this race is sort of playing out exactly the way we expect? I know it's early days. It's only lap 8 of 44, but I think everyone's now found themselves in a bit of a rhythm. It was a little bit spicy for those first couple of laps when drivers were getting into each other, but I think the race has started to settle down and they've got a bit of a rhythm going.
Yeah, I think the drivers are definitely getting into their rhythm, but there are still a few drivers who are probably a little bit out of position compared to the overall pace in their cars based on where they qualified. One driver who is starting to work his way forward as well is Josh Anderson. So he now has also made up 14 positions. We know how fast Josh Anderson is, but he too is just struggling to make progress. It shows how competitive this field is when you've got a driver like Josh Anderson who's finding it so difficult to overtake. And it looks like maybe a few battle scars on Anderson's car as well.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the things, isn't it, is when these races start to play out and then drivers find themselves probably a little bit further down the grid than they would like. I guess that's when they start thinking about pit strategy. Do they decide to try and jump people and pit a little bit earlier so they can get that fresh tyre advantage and maybe make up a position or two? But, he finds himself back in 30th. He's got his work cut out for him. It's definitely not going to be the easiest of jobs, but it never is in any series, especially ours.
One driver starting to make his presence felt on the race a little bit further up the road is Andrew Gilliam, who told us on the grid before the race that he felt that his performance in qualifying was not representative of his speed because of a mistake that he made on his flying lap, and he is demonstrating that he's got a fast race car. He started 11th, but he's up to position 6, Andrew Gilliam, and applying the pressure to the back of our reigning champion, Jared Filsell, and pulling out of the draft. He'll go side by side with Jared Filsell down the back straight, and he will be well positioned on the inside when they get to Sunset Corner. So that will be position 5 for Andrew Gilliam.
How's the damage to Filsell? That is, that's not great. That's on the front left there, so that's really going to be a disadvantage. I think he's probably would have felt that, especially down that back straight. But, wow, we didn't see how that happened, but that's obviously not ideal.
No, and the problem when that happens early in the race, Sandman, is you then have to deal with it for the rest of the race. Yeah. And sometimes it can be something that doesn't hugely affect how fast you are, but if it's bent steering, for example, it just gets you out of rhythm and it leaves you with a bit of an awkward feeling for the rest of the race, which can kind of affect your confidence more than anything.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes too, they do notice that little bit of aero speed, disadvantage a little bit when the fronts. You can see now. Oh, you can see he's blocking. So I reckon it may be hurting his little bit of straight line speed because you can see Phil Sell that's just trying to cover Ethan Grigg-Galt, but now they're going to Constantino a little bit here, give each other a little bit of room. So definitely got his hands full there for Phil Sell. So it's obviously not ideal, but. But it can be interesting to see over the next few laps just to see if it really is a massive disadvantage or not.
So in the Trans-Tasman team, you probably start to think about pit strategy, don't you? And maybe trying to get Phil Sell in at the earliest possible opportunity to get that damage repaired, because the consequences of battling on with a wounded car are probably worse than the consequences of having to deal with worn tyres later in the race. So it's probably thinking on the run about maybe changing from what would have been your original strategy.
Yeah, I guess every team has to weigh it up, don't they, as far as, whether the good outweighs the bad as far as trying to fix some of that damage. Obviously not ideal. You don't want to do it under green conditions, because if you fix that car or do some repairs under green conditions, it really sort of is a bit of a nail in the coffin for as far as the way your night's going to play out. So they'd be thinking about possibly a safety car to see what they can fix. Obviously they will fix a little bit as the tyres and fuel go in, but it's not something you want to have a lengthy stop for, especially under green conditions.
That is Rehan Leonage, who has worked his way up to 11th position, so just outside the top 10 at the moment for Leonage. We saw him there on the outside of Rick Kuznetsov, who we battled against in the qualifying series. And he continues to make very steady progress. It's been a mature drive from young Rehan so far in this race. Look at the focus, look at the concentration.
Looks so much more relaxed at the wheel than, especially when I'm driving myself. I'm not one of the good drivers either, but at the end of the day, he just looks so relaxed and calm. And I think just the way he's going about his driving, it's really great to see. And I think we're going to see some good things for him as the year goes on. But this camera's perfect because it just shows you how his steering input is. Look at him going one-handed too. So that's something that's something that I don't do. But obviously it's really comfortable and working for him. He's got decent pace out there.
So thinking about pit strategy, so if you want to run an even tyre strategy, so divide the race up into thirds basically, you probably pit on lap 14 or 15 for your first pit stop, and then on lap 30 or 31 for your second pit stop, and that gives you roughly an even run of 3 equal stints, as we say. This is a bit further back. So this is the battle just on the fringe of the top 20. Luke Mitchison, who's been in the thick of the action for a couple of laps now. Robert Gibbs just ahead of Mitchison is Richard Hampstead, and Hampstead has a time penalty as well. Contact with Dylan O'Shea at turn 2 on lap 4.
Yeah, obviously that's not ideal, but nevertheless, still plenty of time for all that. It's only lap 10, so if you are going to get that penalty, obviously try and serve it as quick as you can, but at the end of the day, still plenty of time to bounce back. And of course, one thing that could work in his favour too is the safety car. We haven't seen any makings of a safety car at this stage, but never rule it out. You just never know what's going to happen. We've seen places like at Sandown with drivers that have hardware failures, that brought out a safety car. So it doesn't always mean that it'd be good hard racing that could cause an incident on track to bring out a safety car. Anything can happen.
Oh, this is getting very tight here. So Jared Philsell, who's still battling on with that somewhat wounded car, coming under attack now from his teammate Jake Burton and Ethan Grigg-Galt. We saw that Burton got past Grigg-Galt before, and he's now moved up ahead of his teammate Jared Philsell. So Jake Burton has a bit of clear track to work with, and that's important because Andrew Gilliam had pulled ahead by almost 3 seconds. So Philsell was starting to create a bit of a traffic jam for the cars behind, and it is continuing. Here comes Grigg-Galt to the outside of Philsell. They'll go side by side. Oh, Philsell still wants to fight on with this wounded car, and once again it's Grigg-Galt that's going to get hung out dry as Dylan Rudd now goes side by side with the Logitech G Commodore.
Yeah, Phil Sell's got his work cut out for him in that Synergy Sim Racing team. Like, that car obviously looks a little bit familiar to the, looks the same as the Trans-Tasman racing car of Burton, but yeah, he looks like he's really struggling with his car. That damage is really starting to concertina all these cars. You can see, look at the bottleneck. Here these guys showing a little bit more pace, so I think we're probably going to see him probably start to slip down the order as this race goes on.
Yeah, the fact that Phil Sell is dealing with a car that's damaged and somewhat slower than the cars behind it, it is creating this bottleneck effect, so it's bunching up the field behind. And I do fail a bit for Ethan Grigault, because he's had a couple of goes at getting past Jarrett Phil Sell, and neither one of those attempts has paid off, and it's in fact cost him a couple of positions.
Interesting, you can see up the road how far already Burton's got away from him. So you can see how much gap of that's only been a few corners, and to have that pace disadvantage, that's really going to hurt Jared for the rest of the night. So he'd obviously be starting to think about when those pit stops. He will try and, like we touched on, he'll try and fix a little bit of that damage, as we see pit stops now starting to play out. Luke Rosella's in the lane.
So he's the first of our runners to come into the pit, so comes in after lap 11, so probably a little bit earlier than if you were going to divide it up into even stints. But what he'll be looking for is the undercut to try and get an advantage on the cars in front, as Ethan Grigault, that's seriously close, with Dylan Rudd having a big sniff down the inside. And just behind Dylan Rudd, you've got Jake Maloney, Rehan Leonos, Rick Kuznetsov, Brendan Hobson, Adam Briggs, all bunched very tightly together.
I think these guys that are in this bit of a freight train, they probably one of the ones that want to start thinking about pitting early, because if you can get out of this mess, that can be a huge advantage later on as the race goes on. You can see, the inside there. We've got another penalty there too, so we can see that is Ross, a 5-second penalty over contact with Taliagic. So, man, I'll tell you what, the stewards have been busy tonight, haven't they?
They sure have. And so you're right. So one of the ways of resolving the issue of getting caught up in traffic is to pit early, but the problem there is that you're potentially going to be on worn tyres later in the race. The other thing you could do is the opposite. So if everybody else around you starts coming into the pits, then you can actually decide that it's maybe a better option to tough it out and run a longer stint, get yourself a bit of clear track that way, and then have the advantage of fresher tyres a bit later on. So there's a couple of different ways to approach the objective of getting yourself a bit of clear track to work with.
I guess now it'll be interesting to see over these next few laps is when the leaders like Down and Myers and James Scott, when they all start thinking about pitting. I know Madison hasn't got too much to worry about. Obviously, he had that little bit of an advantage at the moment. I think it's about just over 2 seconds at this stage over his teammate in Brady Myers. So he'd be pretty happy, I think, at this stage just to keep pushing on. The car looks good. He's obviously starting to gap the field, and he doesn't have to worry about too much of a threat from behind.
It's been a classy performance from Madison Down so far, and he's just managing the gap back to his teammate Brady Myers. Here we go. This shot will give us an idea of the gaps between cars. So there's James Scott, and then we've got this battle a bit further back with the battle between Ethan Grigault and Jared Phil Sell. As we see a couple more cars coming into the pits. Brenton Hobson has come in, Adam Briggs, Blake Warboys all in at pit lane, taking their first compulsory pit stop.
Yeah, I think this is where it starts to get interesting, doesn't it, now when we start to see all these pit stops start to take place, and then everyone's fighting for that little bit of track position. And of course, I start to think about how some of these teams are going to deal with these beat up cars. There's really good racing out there, side by side stuff, as you can see here. Ethan Grigault, he's got his hands full, and of course they're going to try and outbrake. Oh, look at the damage up the side of Ethan Grigault's too as well. So obviously, thankfully, it's down the side. He hasn't got that nose damage like what Jared's got. But yeah, not ideal, but thankfully it's only on the side at this stage.
Yeah, Ethan Grigault's car, like you say, also now looking very second-hand, and he's lost another spot. So once again, in trying to make a move on Jared Phil Sell, he's been hung out high and wide, and it's allowed Jake Maloney to get past. So now it's going to be Maloney's turn to have a crack at Phil Sell's Commodore. And just having a look at the pit stop times for those cars that have come down pit lane, Luke Rosella, who was one of the first cars to pit, he had a very short pit stop. He was only stationary for 10.8 seconds, so he's obviously short filled, and you would have to say that he's looking for not just the undercut, but also a bit of track position as a result of not taking on that much fuel.
Sorry to talk over you there. Anderson took a nice little dive up there, the inside. That got my attention. That was just one car in front of where on board was Stenny there, but in front of Boyd there was Anderson, and he took a dive up the inside, and man, he made it work. So that was a good move. But on board with Stenny, he's just got his eyes forward, obviously starting to think about those pit stops. He'll be in communication with his team to work out when they're going to start thinking about it. What are we, lap 14? So it's got to be sooner rather than later, you'd think sometimes.
Yeah, we're reaching those numbers, aren't we, where you can come in and split the race up into thirds as Rick Kuznetsov comes in. Jack Boyd is in, Brian Ball also in pit lane, so more stops taking place. With Rosella, as we've got back down the inside, Ethan Grigol on Jake Maloney, makes the move through, so gets back one of the spots that he lost. Can he finally get past Jared Filsell? Surely he has to do it this lap.
It's frustrating, isn't it, as a driver? You can see the pace that he's got. Jared's just trying to cover his line. He's exactly entitled to do that. But, of course, Ethan's got to just find his way around him. He's going to try for the over and under. Can't quite get the car clear. But he knows that he's got that pace advantage. And as it starts to go on, lap after lap, I know as a driver sometimes I've been in that position and you do start to get frustrated. But Jared's entitled to do and run that line. It's just going to make it hard for Ethan Grigol to get the job done around the outside.
And he's going to hang tough around the outside, but has to tuck back in behind. Filsell had a huge slide coming off the previous corner, and Grigol saw the incentive, but Filsell just positioning the car exactly where he needs to, so that Grigol's got no opportunity to get past. Now, you'll remember last year we saw Jared Filsell doing defensive driving in the battle that he was having for what was the race lead with Jake Burton. Now he's side by side once again with Ethan Grigol, who has to turn back in and hit the apex to make sure that Jake Maloney can't get back up the inside.
Here we go. I reckon he's got it here now. He's just got to keep that pace now. He's tucked right up under the wind. Obviously, Jared's going to go to the inside, stay to the outside. Hopefully, he can get that little bit more pace, but he's going to have his work cut up for him to go around the outside. This is a fast sweeper. Oh, he clears Jared, gets the job done. That's exactly what he wanted to do. Oh, he's got to be careful not to clip the inside, but now Maloney will dip up there. Filsell will drop 2 spots and possibly third with Rudd having to go as well, but Jared's heading to the lane.
Yeah, he's decided enough's enough, and he comes down pit lane, and he's followed in by Dylan Rudd and Rehan Leonage as well. We saw there that there's been a penalty for Luke Rosella, so one of our contenders, a 5-second time penalty for contact earlier in the race. So that could be critical, because remember, Luke Rosella is one of our contenders, and is possibly going to pop up in a pretty good position once this first round of pit stops is complete, based on the fact that he had a very quick pit stop, but he will have a 5-second penalty to serve. I didn't see which car that he had contact with, so we'll have to double check that with race control. But yes, Luke Rosella, a 5-second penalty.
Those sort of things are gifts, aren't they? When you're a driver and you're racing against these guys and it's all nice and close, and some of these drivers get themselves a penalty, it's just a gift to you, isn't it? You're like, thankfully, that's one person that I don't have to worry about too much, because they know they have to have that 5-second penalty. So, and I've been surprised. It's actually probably, I guess, as I said before, the stewards have been pretty busy in these opening 15 laps, and you know, I guess everyone's just eager and keen to get the season getting on with it and having a red hot go. But that's something you just want to probably try and do less of as the season goes on, obviously.
This is a pretty willing battle. So Rick Kuznetsov, who's already done his pit stop, engaged in a battle with now Jared Filsell. So Filsell's come back out of the pits. Oh, big contact there with Talyancic, that was. So Filsell's lost a lot of track position from where he was before he came into the pits. So just having a look at how long he spent stationary, 22.3 seconds. That was a long stop for Jared Filsell.
Jared just got gifted a spot, and if he can hold on to the outside, he's not going to be able to quite do it, but almost got gifted 2 spots where those guys were starting to battle each other. So obviously that car's going to feel a little bit better because he's got fresh tyres on it, but obviously with that damage that he's got, we've touched on it, that's obviously going to hurt him throughout this race. But you know, he's really putting on a bit of an effort to hold on here.
Kuznetsov defending hard against Jared Filsell, who will have the incentive because he's got fresher tyres and he will have a bit more car speed at this stage of the race. Phil Sell looking pretty aggressive on the back of Rick Kuznetsov. Down the back straight, they head. Some pull out at the last second to dive to the inside. Sitting in the slipstream for now. In fact, he looks to the outside line on Kuznetsov. Like I said, there's multiple lines that you can take through this sunset corner, which leads back onto the main straightaway. And Phil Sell content just to stay in the slipstream for the time being.
It's a bit of a rarity, isn't it, when you look at Jared Philsell on that Synergy Racing Commodore? Like, you don't normally see his cars beat up like that. So that's something that sort of is a bit of a surprise for round one, because he's obviously a driver that's got very good pace. We saw how strong he was throughout last year, and then most of the season he was out on his own. So out the front, didn't have too much worry behind him. But when he finds himself in this position, he's got himself a decent battle on his hands, but we're not used to seeing the car as knocked up as it is.
Oh, this is Josh Muggleton having contact with Luke Rosella, and obviously those cars are on different strategies because Muggleton has not yet made his first pit stop, so on significantly older tyres compared to Luke Rosella.
That's a tricky part of a race too, isn't it? When you come around drivers that have got different tyres on, whether they're older or newer, you know, it's something you've got to sort of keep in the back of your mind, because you'll see someone that'll catch you hand over fist and you know that they've got fresher tyres. Sometimes it's not even worth battling them because you've got your own race going on. You know that you're going to pit soon, and the more you fight, the more that's probably going to lead to drama and end up probably costing you more time than it's actually worth.
A lot of drivers going quite deep into this first stint. I would have expected more of the front runners to have taken their stops by now, but we've still got the top. In fact, 15 out of the top 16 cars are yet to do their first pit stops, so a lot of drivers electing to run a long first stint and obviously shorten up their stints a bit later on to ensure that they're on fresher tyres at the end of the race.
The new colours for Josh Anderson this year. Obviously, last year we saw him in the Cool Drive colours that he has on his Aussie racing car. This year, he's got the colours of Trans-Tasman Racing on board that Commodore, so that's going to take a little bit of getting used to. I'm so used to seeing him in those Cool Drive colours, but he'd be pretty happy at the moment. Obviously, he hasn't made his pit stop, but he finds himself in 10th position, so he's trying to push on while he's got that little bit of clear air, and hopefully he can make up some spots. I think when we saw him at one stage, he was back down in 30th on the grid.
Yeah, so currently sitting inside the top 10, and by running this long stint, he will be hoping, from what I alluded to a bit earlier on, where as other cars make their pit stops and fall away, he has some clear track, and then a bit later on in the race, he'll have nice fresh tyres to charge his way up through the order. Here is Jordan Ross down in 31st position, battling it out with Brad Rattu, and Luke Mitchison and Jack Boyd involved in that contest, as is Robert Gibbs in the Evolution Racing Mustang.
Oh, he's going to make a move up the inside too. Last of the late breakers. It's got sideways. He's locked it up. Contact too. A couple of cars going on the front, and he's gone round. Oh, and then more contact as well. So, that was a whole concertina effect.
Oh, what a disaster. Let's check that out on the Logitech replay. So, locked the rear brakes as he dived to the inside of Brad Rattu. Nailed Rattu in the door. Rattu goes around, and then as Rattu goes to rejoin the circuit, he clips the back of Gibbs' car and sends Gibbs into a spin. So absolute pandemonium, and no doubt the officials will be having a bit of a look at that one.
Oh, it's awful as a driver when you go to make that move up the inside and you're hard on the brakes. As soon as that car starts to get away from you and that rear locks, you're just a passenger sometimes. So, yeah, obviously not the way they wanted it to play out. But, yeah, unfortunately, I think the stewards may have something to say about all that. You see Hampstead's in the lane too. We can see he's decided to peel off. So he's slowly starting to slip down the order. Obviously, he was in those battles. So it'll be interesting to see if this is actually played out for him, because now that he's had that bit of free air, but of course you've got the cars that are behind you that have been charging on fresh rubber. Nice little side-by-side action here too, these guys. Oh, up on the... I always worry a little bit when the cars get up on the curve. You see them getting onto two wheels, and it's like they're just holding their breath. They start to get side by side. Have a look at this onboard action. He's desperately trying to close the door because he can see the car coming up behind him. Briggs was going to try and get that job done, but now they're all going to study. No way they want to go through wide into here. Teammates are going to work to each other and try and hold that 72 on the outside. But boy, oh boy, have a look at them side by side there through there, giving each other plenty of room. But that is good, hard racing.
Good, clean racing. Well done, guys. And that is the contest positions 17 and 18, which just goes to show how cutthroat this series is.
Yeah, we talk about it all throughout last year. It doesn't matter where you are on the grid, whether you're first or last. Everyone is having an awesome battle. As we see Myers, is he heading in the lane? No, he's still going to push on. But James Scott is. He's fired into pit lane.
Comes into the pits out of position number 3. Andrew Gilliam in the pits out of 4th position as well. At the moment, highest placed car to have done a pit stop is Luke Rosella. Ahead of Rehan Leonage, Wayne Burke, Dylan O'Shea, Dylan Rudd. Those cars have all done their first pit stops. It's going to be interesting. We'll get a bit of an idea of the effect of the undercut here, because these drivers, by leaving their pit stops later, they're probably going to sacrifice a bit of track position because of how long they've been on that set of tyres, but it will come back to them a bit later in the race, and hopefully it'll build up to a nice climactic finish where we have 5 cars separated by half a second at the finish, like we did in this corresponding race last year.
It's always interesting, isn't it, from a driver's point of view, when you're told and your team tells you to stay out and you push on those old tyres, you know the drivers behind you have got that fresh rubber, you know they're going to be coming, and like you said, you've got to wait for that race to play out, because obviously there's going to be swings and roundabouts as far as tyre wear and tyre advantage. So the guys who pitted early, they're fast now, but later on they're going to be struggling. A little bit of contact there, Ethan getting, well, he just ran a little bit sideways from that contact, but he got away with it. So thankfully he's been able to get back in line. But man, Burke was just having a red hot go there.
So Ethan Grigolt has come back out in 10th position after taking his pit stop, just ahead of Wayne Burke, and about 4 seconds behind James Scott, who was 1.3 seconds behind Rehan Leonage. So just goes to show, remember, Leonage was just outside the top 10 before he took his pit stop, but James Scott was up inside the top 3. So just goes to show the effect of the undercut. However, James Scott's pit stop was 13 seconds longer than Rehan Leonage, which means that his second stop will be significantly shorter. So like I said, you do sacrifice that track position by staying out longer, but it does come back to you. You get a lot of that time back later in the race with shorter stops and fresher tyres.
Looks like Jake Burton has decided to fire off into the lane. So he was in P3 at this stage, but he's darted in to get his pit stop over and done with. Is that Maloney? He's in as well. So it's interesting to see now they're all starting to play out. The TTR guys have all been chatting amongst themselves, and they've started to work on this strategy. Stenberg, he's going to stay out. He's going to keep pushing on, so he's obviously pretty happy with his car. But Madison Down, our race leader, over Brody Myers and Tom Frere at this stage are your top 3.
And no surprise there to see that not just a 5-second penalty, but a 15-second penalty for that incident where Jordan Ross cannoned into the side of Brad Ratu. And also, ultimately, that involved one of the other Evolution Racing Team cars as well. So the officials have decided, obviously, that Jordan Ross didn't have full and proper control of his vehicle in making that overtaking manoeuvre, and they've decided that because it resulted in a couple of other cars getting turned around, that is severe enough to warrant a 15-second time penalty.
As we watch Madison Down on track, he's now just starting to come across traffic, so I wonder if they'll start thinking about bringing him in now, because obviously you don't want to give up too much and start getting caught up in traffic. He has got a little bit of a buffer. He finds himself 4.2 seconds up the road, so that's obviously quite handy to keep in his pocket, so he hasn't got too much pressure about getting the job done. But I know sometimes these teams, when they find themselves in a little bit of traffic and they've got that pit option, they will decide to get into pit lane.
So riding on board with our race leader, Madison Down. He's going deep, deep, deep into this first stint, almost on lap number 20. So it's a long first stint, and it'll be a couple of short stints for the run home. So he's doing all of the heavy lifting early, Madison Down, and I suppose that's the luxury of being the race leader, isn't it? He's opened up a margin of over 4 seconds on Brady Myers. And by running along in this first stint, it's going to really open up the strategic options for Madison Down later.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just shows the comfort that he's got in his car. It was obviously a quick race car for a quali car, but he looks really comfortable with the car. You can see, just look at it from this visor cam, about the steering input that he's got. You know, these tyres are 21 laps old, and now he's just looks actually quite comfortable. You can see there's a little bit of correction. You'd expect that as he tries to push on, but he's obviously not fighting it, so he's happy with the car. And we see Myers and Freya there in the pit lane now, as well as Stenberg.
Yep, so that means Madison Down is the sole remaining car to come down pit lane for its first pit stop. So Brady Myers, Tom Freer and Kurt Stenberg, the cars visiting pit lane on this occasion. It's going to be interesting here to see where they will pop out relative to the cars that have already stopped. James Scott back out onto the racetrack, Brady Myers, I should say, back out onto the racetrack in position number 3. Ahead of James Scott, but 13.2 seconds behind Luke Rosella. So Rosella, by taking that early pit stop and making it a short stop, that's really works to his advantage in terms of track position. He's 30.6 seconds behind the race leader Madison Down, so I reckon he's going to pop up in the race lead once this first round of pit stops is complete.
Yeah, and for people who are wondering how that's all going to play out, obviously, if that happens, you're going to see the tyre advantage that Down will have too. So it probably won't happen for too much longer as far as him leading, but it's a good little strategic battle, and I'm glad that someone's actually rolled the dice and had a crack on it. That's really good.
So we're seeing there, that's Rick Kuznetsov in car number 888 getting overtaken by Blake Warboys and Tom Freer. The weakness for Rick Kuznetsov, as he was one of the earlier stoppers, he stopped on lap number 13, so he's losing spots to cars that have stopped later. Tom Freer, for example, didn't stop until lap 20, so Tom Freer on far fresher tyres as in comes our race leader Madison Down after 21 laps complete, so almost halfway into the race before taking his first stop.
He'd be absolutely stoked. Obviously, we touched on the dramas that he had leading into round 1 this time last year. He didn't make the grid, but really he's making up for it tonight, isn't he? He obviously did a great job in qualifying, led this race from the start. There's obviously going to be a bit of a change in the guard here, but once this all plays out, you see he's just gone past, so Rosella takes the lead. Down is still in the pits. He'll now leave with those fresh tyres, and now he'll be able to chase him down.
Indeed he will. Now, do you know, Sandman, with the 5-second penalty for Luke Rosella, will he serve that penalty in his second stop, or will it get added onto his time at the end of the race? Because that's actually quite important.
Yeah, we'll have to reach out to our stewards and get them to flick us a message to the broadcast room, because it's interesting, because obviously if that's still up his sleeve, yeah, that's really going to be tricky as we get towards the dying stages of this race.
In terms of cleansing the field, the answer that I'm hoping for is that he'll serve it in the next pit stop. Of course, that'll give us a true and correct race order once the second round of pit stops are complete. But anyway, still plenty of battles on the track that we can focus on, including this contest, which is from positions 29, 30, 31 and 32. Like I said, there's action right the way through the field when it comes to the Logitech G Pro Invitational Series.
It's really good, isn't it? And like we said before, you know, it doesn't matter if you're first or last. These guys all have a great battle. And we know that these guys are decent drivers because everyone's made the cut to get into the field. So really good to see the action. It doesn't matter where it is, and more here. Side by side as you get turned in there, Rick connects off. Oh, I always hold my breath on exit there. Oh, contact, the car's going to go around. Oh, did they hold on to it? Unbelievable.
That was Jared Filsell. So he has been belted from pillar to post today, and he returns serve. Oh, both of these cars are going to go wide here.
Wow, if that was a little bit of payback, oh, I tell you what, he was lucky to hold on to that. Look how knocked around that car is now. It doesn't even have a boot. I have not seen a car this knocked around from Jared Filsell in a long time. This is really unheard of.
The night has not gone according to plan for Jared Filsell, so there we go. That was double contact, and then a look at the payback here. Do you think there was intent in that, or do you think it was a case of Filsell just out-braking himself?
Look, that car's knocked around too. That car's not in the greatest of conditions, but look, thankfully that car stayed on the racetrack. They both forgot to push on, but yeah, he's just having a night that he'll be pretty quick to forget, I think, for our Jared Filsell.
The contender for race victory in this corresponding event last year, but a race to forget for Filsell this evening. One driver having a far more productive evening, Jake Maloney. He's moved up 11 spots, started 20th on the grid. He's up to 9th position in the Trans-Tasman Racing Mustang. And we are now past the halfway point of the race. If you've just joined us here on the Logitech G Pro Invitational Facebook page or the Motorsport Australia social media channels, you are watching round number 1 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series. It is the turn in race apparel Sebring sprint with commentary from Steve Sandman Clark and Lockie Mansell. And here's another replay. This is Luke Rosella. Now, this must have been earlier on, because obviously Luke Rosella is way out in front at the moment. So this is taking us back to a bit earlier in the race. And this is a side-by-side battle that he was involved in with the number 20, Marcello Rivera. So that was why Rosella was penalised, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like that was that contact on lap number 7.
Yep.
So that's what the officials deemed. He probably just didn't give enough racing room on exit, and that's what's led to that 5-second penalty.
Which is still to be served by Luke Rosella, your current race leader. Madison Down is second, ahead of Brady Myers. Then it's James Scott, Rehan Lenage up to 5th position, back to Ethan Grigol, Andrew Gilliam, Jake Burton, Jake Maloney and Dylan O'Shea rounding out the top 10. 20 laps to go, and we've still got a round of pit stops to be completed by every driver in the field as well.
I guess Madison Downey, where he finds himself 6.8 seconds behind Luke, but obviously knowing that he still has that penalty to take, that he can take in the next stop, that really takes the pressure off Madison. And of course, they're on different strategies. You're going to find that he's got a little bit more pace. Man, sideways there for Jared Filsell. That car, it looks ugly, but it looks really ugly to drive too.
So hearing that as a result of that incident between Rosella and Rivera, it took Rivera 4 minutes to repair the damage, so that's why the penalty has been handed to Luke Rosella, and we are hearing that he can take that penalty, or he will be required, I should say, to take that penalty at the next pit stop. So he'll have to stay stationary for 5 seconds longer than the time actually taken to complete the stop, as Jared Filsell continues to battle on with the wounded car. And when you're in Jared Filsell's position here, it takes a massive amount of self-control to maintain your composure and try and nurse the car home, because the thing you have to remember, Sandman, is there's still championship points on the line, so you can't just throw in the towel and give up. You do have to press on and try and bank as many points as you can out of the round, because even if you only score 30 or 40 points for a lowly finishing position, it could make all the difference come the end of the season.
Absolutely, and if you had said that to Madison Down last season, getting 0 points for round number 1 and still finishing second in the championship, I mean, he gladly would have taken his whatever points he could get. So yeah, it makes for a tough night. Obviously, you know you're not going to get a decent result, but like you said, it's a long year, and every point counts towards the end of the year.
So we expect the second round of pit stops to probably take place any time from lap 29 onwards. There might be a few drivers that will stop a bit earlier than that, particularly those ones who stopped early for the first round of stops, but they will give themselves a long stint to the checkered flag. Conversely, the drivers who stopped later, such as Madison Down, who didn't stop until the end of lap 21, they might go a lot deeper, and they might stop as late as lap 35 or 36 and give themselves a very short run to the flag. And we're having a look here at some comparative pit stop times. So Luke Rosella, he might be leading the race by 5.4 seconds, but there's some bad news for him. Apart from the fact that he's got a 5-second penalty, he's also going to have the longest final pit stop of any driver in the top 10. So when you add that on to the 5-second penalty, it's going to be a long, long stop for Luke Rosella.
Yeah, it's a really interesting graph, that, isn't it? Because I was just going through, I was excited to see Rehan in 5th place at the moment, but obviously he's got a few more seconds over the other drivers around him that he has to take on for fuel. But that's the beauty of these long races when fuel strategy comes into it. Do you decide to go short at the start? Do you go long? You know, some drivers and teams will even it out. But yeah, still a lot to play out over these next few laps.
Madison Downs in the box seat, isn't he? Currently second in the race, but he'll have a very short final pit stop, and because he can go deeper into the race than everybody else, he's going to have a nice fresh set of Dunlop control tyres for the final stint.
Amazing, isn't it? Like, these races are never really easy, but he is having an easy one tonight. And know that he's got teammates behind him. You know, that little bit of pressure comes off a little bit when you know you've got teammates. Although they're obviously hungry, though, behind you, you know that you don't really have that added pressure where if someone else is there behind you. So, you know, yeah, as far as races go that are easy, this one is looking pretty easy for him at this stage. But, you know, who knows?
A couple of other drivers we're hearing are going to have very short final pit stops as well. Some of them are a little bit further back, but James Scott, he had a very long first stop, so he would have a nice short final stop, and so too will Andrew Gilliam. So we heard Andrew Gilliam talking about his qualifying woes, but so far the race has gone much more according to plan for him and the Pursuit Sim Racing team.
It's always a sigh of relief, isn't it, too, when you find yourself, if you don't have the best qualifying run, if you've got yourself a decent race car and you've got a lot of time up your sleeve, like we touched on this race, 44 laps, that's plenty of time to sort of bounce back from what might not be one of your best qualifying sessions. So it's important to have a good qualifying car, but more importantly, you want a decent race car underneath you so you can get those positions back.
A bit further back in the pack, looking at Robert Gibbs. So we saw that he got involved in that incident which was triggered by Jordan Ross and also involved Brad Ratto a bit earlier on. He's going to go side by side here with his Evolution Racing teammate Matthew Bowler.
Just heart and mouth stuff, isn't it? But that's the beauty of that corner where you can have two different lines. You know, you think someone's going to fire up the inside there, but there is enough racetrack there where you can race around the outside, and that was perfect to see that there between those two teammates. They would just have a different goes at that corner, and also turned out to be a nice result. You know, everyone came out nice and clean at the end.
Other interesting thing is we're starting to get an indication of the comparative tyre degradation. So when Luke Rosella came out of the pits, he was leading the race by more than 7 seconds from Madison Down. The margin has now come down to under 4 seconds, and Madison Down on his last lap was 1.1 seconds quicker than Luke Rosella. There's a good reason for that. Madison's tyres are 10 laps fresher than the tyres on Luke's car.
It's funny from a driver's point of view too. Sometimes when you see that car in front of you, it acts as a little bit of a magnet sometimes, because you know it prompts you. You can see where they are, you can see where they turn in, you notice, you sort of pick points on the racetrack where they are when you hit your braking zone. So for Madison, it's a little bit of a magnet, and you can just see that time is just slowly starting to get eaten away.
So Luke Rosella, we expect will be one of the cars to come in first for the next round of pit stops, given that he was the first car to come in for the first pit stop. Here is Dylan O'Shea. And also Wayne Burke. So they're currently scored in positions 11 and 12 respectively.
Well, Berkey's got himself a nice little battle here, hasn't he? He's got Rudd in front of him, O'Shea behind him, Freya's just there as well. So none of these guys can take a breather for the moment because they've all got their hands full. And of course, now we start thinking about that second pit stop. What's the car like at the moment? What are the tyres like underneath you? Have you got something to battle with? Because if you don't and you find yourself in a train here, then start thinking about that pit stop and maybe having that charge towards the end of the race.
Blake Warboys and Richard Hampstead battling it out a little bit further back in the pack. Blake Warboys driving for the WK&P Racing outfit in the Logitech G Pro Invitational Series this season.
And lucky enough to have another camera there. You can see him hard at the wheel as he tries to chase down Richard Hampstead in front of him. I really do get a kick out of these cameras just to see how these guys go about their racing, and it really gives you an understanding. You can watch the steering wheel and gives you sort of an idea of how that car is feeling for them, because if they start soaring on the wheel, you know they're sort of struggling with grip, or they might be struggling with some push or some oversteer, but it doesn't look too bad. But he got himself a nice little battle with Richard Hempstead.
Indeed, he did. One of the other things that I've just noticed as well, Sandman, we were talking about Josh Anderson and the fact that he had to start rear of grid after the penalty, the carryover penalty from the end of the last season. He is out of the race, back in the pits, and he has been there for the last 8 laps. So it's not been a very fruitful night for Josh Anderson, one of the drivers that we expected to be a title contender this season. He's going to walk away from round 1 of the series with a big fat 0 against his name.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a heartbreaker, isn't it, for round number 1? Obviously, you want to put your best foot forward for the start of a brand new season. And we're probably going to talk about it a lot. You're probably going to get sick of us saying it throughout the year, but Madison Down was absolutely, able to bounce back from not even participating in round 1 last year. So it's not all of a loss, but, at the end of the day, it just makes your season just that little bit trickier.
Jared Filsell is tumbling down the timesheets now as well. And we've got some pit stops taking place. So Brad Ratu, Brian Ball, Jordan Ross, Matthew Bong, Robert Gibbs all into the pits. I'm just wondering if Jared Filsell's actually parked and up somewhere on the side of the track, because the timing is just indicating him dropping down the order. And there he is. Jared Filsell's night is done, and the safety car has been called. This is going to trigger a flurry of pit stops, the last round of pit stops. Everybody will come in all at once.
Wow. I mean, who would have picked this? You just don't see Jared Filsell's car look like that. As we go to a bit of a replay, he's had a touch from behind. It's got crossed up round and hard into the Armco. That's obviously ended that night. That car has been a battering ram from the start of the night. It's incredible to see how much damage he's got to that, and unfortunately, I think it's night over for him.
Who would have predicted that the first safety car of the 2023 Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series would be caused by our reigning champion? It's been a shocker of a night for Jared Filsell, not the night that he wanted to kick off his title defence, and what has been a miserable evening has finally come to a sad and sorry end.
That car, it just looked awful for him all night to drive, unfortunately, and man, he's just got caught up there, and that's night over. He looks like he's trying to push on here a little bit, but at the end of the day, you can see he's just got sideways. There's that little bit of contact, and then he's just fighting it, and then it just gets crossed up over the other side of the racetrack. And it's a hard spot for Gibbs to be in. Obviously, Jared was having enough issues as it was going on with that car itself, but into the Armco, and that brings out our first safety car of the night. And of course, pit stops are happening now. Everyone is in the pit lane.
It's going to be a race off pit lane. Bad news for Luke Rosella, because he has to serve out that time penalty and take this long pit stop under safety car conditions with the field compressed. So it's going to be a costly outcome there for Luke Rosella, and it's Madison Down who leads the race off pit lane ahead of Brady Myers and James Scott. Andrew Gilliam moves up to position number 4 ahead of Jake Burton. Luke Rosella has fallen back to 6th position, and then it's Weinberg, Ethan Grigolt, Jake Maloney and Rehan Leonage rounding out the top 10 in the race off pit road. There they are queuing up behind the Logitech G Aston Martin safety car.
This has really changed things for Madison, hasn't it? Because obviously we spoke about with these pit stops, he had himself like a 4 or 5 second margin before all the pit stops were going to play out. So now this changes everything. This bunches the field up, and now he's obviously, we said before that he hasn't worried about too much happening in his rearview mirror. That all changes now because everyone is all bunched up.
It certainly does, and what it sets up is a cleansed field and a flat-out sprint to the checkered flag over what you would expect to be either 14 or 15 laps, depending on how long this safety car period lasts.
Well, while we're under safety car conditions, we might take this as have a little bit of a break. We'll be back. You are watching the Turn-In Race Apparel Sebring Sprint, round number 1 of the Logitech G Series. We'll be back after this short commercial break.
Welcome back, everybody. You are trackside virtually for round number 1 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational A-Series. It's coming to you live right around the world thanks to the Australian Sim Racing Group YouTube channel and also the Motorsport Australia social media channels broadcasting all of the action for us tonight as well. Great to have Motorsport Australia on board supporting the Logitech G Pro Invitational A-Series in 2023. And this round, of course, presented by Turn In Race Apparel. Steve Sandman Clark and Lockie Mansell in the commentary box with you tonight. We are under safety car conditions because of an incident involving our reigning series champion, Jared Phil-Sell, getting tangled up in an incident in a severely wounded car, clouting the Armco and ultimately retiring from the race altogether. That has left Madison Down as our race leader behind the Aston Martin safety car ahead of his Trans-Tasman Racing teammate Brady Myers, with James Scott sitting in 3rd position.
Mate, who would have picked it? I mean, if you had said to us that our first safety car of the season here at Sebring would be because of our reigning champion, I mean, no one would have picked that. And I've said it a couple of times throughout the broadcast, it's not often that you see Jared with a knocked around race car like that. He's obviously, this is a night for him to just scratch off the list and forget about. You know, it's all been about pushing on. It's a long season. He just needs to forget about tonight and just see how next round plays out at Phillip Island.
Indeed, and we saw last year that Madison Downs scored a 0 from round number 1 and managed to fight his way back to 2nd in the championship. So even if you do have a bad first round, it's certainly not an insurmountable situation, and there's no doubt that Jared Phil-Sell will have plenty of opportunities to redeem himself in the remaining rounds, as will Josh Anderson, another retirement from tonight's race and another driver who will leave this round with 0 points. But we're set for an interesting sprint to the line. Because of the fact that that safety car came out, it means that all of the strategic variation has pretty much been taken out of the race now. So it's going to be a pure, raw, flat-out sprint to the finish line with everybody on the same set of tyres, or tyres that are in the same condition. You know, now it's a question of who's got the best race car underneath them and who can drive it fastest in the run to the flag.
Absolutely. Well, we called it the Turn In Race Apparel Sebring Sprint, and that's exactly what we're going to get towards the end of this race. And I think for some of these drivers that now, obviously, they know what they've got underneath them. They've got a fair understanding of how that car's feeling. And, of course, Madison Dowd, he finds himself in the best spot possible. He's got himself a clear racetrack. He's got a teammate behind him and a fast race car. So he's got all the makings of a possible round 1 win here.
Who are you looking at to potentially make up some positions when we go green again?
Oh, mate, I mean, we have seen so many people throughout this field. I mean, just going down the timing board now, Gilliam, he's made up 7 spots. He's obviously fast. Jake Burton finds himself in 5th position at the moment. He's up 8 positions. So, I mean, there's drivers like that that have been probably quiet throughout the night, and you'll probably find that they will attack now. They'll be a little bit stronger. They know what they've got underneath them. Everyone's pretty much at a level playing field because of that fresh rubber. It takes all that equation out, and everyone's just going to run hard to the finish line now.
I think that you're right. Gilliam and Burton are definitely the danger men. I think that Gilliam would dearly love the podium finish. And also, Luke Rosella, he was able to serve that 5-second penalty in the pit stop. He's fallen back to 6th. The penalty's done now. He's on the same tyres as everybody else. Although, for whatever reason, his car's sporting a fair bit of damage. So, I'm not sure if he got hit up the backside or what's happened, but a lot of damage to the rear of Luke Rosella's car.
Yeah, that's obviously not ideal as we go into the restart. We touched on how bad that Jared Phil-Sell's car looked and how many struggles he had with his car. So not ideal, but he knows he's only got to get it round to the next 14 laps or so. He'll try and push on. We saw he did have pace, but whether that damage is going to affect his race car, we're just going to have to wait and see.
A couple of other drivers that I've been watching at this restart. Dylan Rudd qualified in 7th position, but he's fallen back to 13th. The strategic side of things hasn't worked optimally for him, but he did manage to qualify in the top 10, so clearly his pace is not too bad. So it'll be interesting to see if he can recover any spots in this last stint, as we hear from race control that the lights are out on the safety car, so we will have a resumption of play this time around. And it's going to be a 14-lap sprint to the checkered flag.
course, now everyone's just sort of second guessing on, because all of it now comes down to Madison Down. He decides when he decides to get off and go for start this race, whether he decides to hold back a little bit or whether he pushes on straight away. That's what he's done. Even before the corner, he's decided to push on. So he's gotten the call for the green flag and he's already got underway.
Keen to get on with it, wasn't he, Madison Down? He wants to break the slipstream of the cars behind and bolt away into the distance. We've seen how effective the slipstream can be here at the Sebring circuit, and Madison Down has got his foot to the floor. A couple of drivers taking alternative lines, looking to the inside on the run into turn number 1. I think we might have had a change of position there, or at least a driver moving to the inside to try and defend his position from the attacking cars behind, but it's Trans-Tasman Racing teammates running first and second now that we're back to racing conditions.
Yeah, Brady Myers, James Scott, I think they're all pretty close to Madison as far as... he caught me by surprise of when he decided to go. I didn't expect him to go that early, but he's done the jump and everyone's pretty much stayed in touch. So I think everyone will be pretty happy with the way that start has played out, because sometimes we've seen on restarts where the drivers will back the field up a little bit, and that's when it causes drama. But Madison Down, he was keen to get on with it, but he hasn't got everything going his own way. He's got teammate Myers right behind him.
And it was Andrew Gilliam who moved to the inside there on the run into turn 1. He was defending hard from Jake Burton. As we say, that was Ethan Grigault getting up the inside of Wayne Burke. So Ethan Grigault up to 7th position. Wayne Burke drops back a spot and falls back into the clutches of Jake Maloney as well. Maloney up 11 positions from where he started. Here's a replay of Andrew Gilliam and Jake Burton. So Gilliam was under attack from Burton as they headed down the main straight, and Gilliam was well aware of that, and that's why he stayed to driver's left just to protect that inside line and make sure that the door was not left open. And in fact, a bit of contact between the two cars at the apex of turn 1.
You see, just checked up a little bit in the corner, and that sort of caught Burton out. I think he was maybe trying to think about a possible sort of under-over, but didn't quite get the job done. Obviously, had to check up himself, but both lucky that could have caused a bit of a drama, but they got away with it, thankfully.
So Madison Down, your race leader, fastest lap of the race that time around by Brady Myers at 2:01.3. He was 0.3 of a second quicker than Madison Down, no doubt because of the effect of the slipstream. Able to get the tyre and punch out a really quick lap time. We saw Brady Myers snatching the race victory in the dying stages of this corresponding race last year, and once again he finds himself in contention for victory tonight.
Throughout the season last year, I said, that he said he sort of felt it was a little bit of a Bradbury move, obviously making that dart at the line and obviously capitalising on some people's bad luck. But he's got genuine pace here, and he's really taken it to Madison Down. So he's obviously quite comfortable with this racetrack. The car looks good, but now he's just starting to lose a little bit of a gap to his teammate, and now he's got pressure from James Scott.
And these top 3, if anything, they've all just broken away slightly from the contest between Andrew Gilliam and Jake Burton, as Luke Rosella is fighting hard in his wounded Commodore to try and hold back the cars behind. But a bit like the situation that we saw Jared Filsell in earlier on, it's a conga line that'll form up behind Luke Rosella. And once again, it's Ethan Grigault who has to deal with the challenge of being stuck behind a car that's not performing at its optimum potential.
He'll be kicking himself worried. Ethan will just be like, what have I done to deserve this? I've had to battle between a battled race car for most of the night, and now I've got another one with Rosella. If it looks like he's going to be able to get this car turned in, look at the pace he's got on exit. It's just going to be a drag race now. And, yeah, he'd be thankful to get this car behind him, because he's had that drama all night of having to battle broken race cars.
Almost getting a bit of a bump draft as well, and moves right across in front of Luke Rosella. Very aggressive move there from Ethan Grigault. He doesn't want to get held up for any longer than he needs to, and Wayne Burke able to make the move through as well. And here comes Jake Maloney, so Luke Rosella is getting shuffled backwards at a rate of knots with the damage that he is having to battle with in his Commodore.
Amazing. It was almost a carbon copy. That's exactly what Grigault did to Filsell when he got past him. Just darted to the right, made sure that he wasn't going to get that move done on the inside. So he's now got it behind him. But now look at all this going on behind. Obviously, we saw how much a broken car really affects these drivers. And now everyone's here all bunched up, and they've got to deal with Rosella now.
Rehan Leonage, the next driver, trying to find a way past Luke Rosella, and he tried to do that. He left the door open for Brenton Hobson. Maybe just a little bit of inexperience there for Leonage, but this will be good practice for him in terms of the racecraft side of things, having to find a safe spot to overtake that slower car, but without leaving room for the cars behind to get past him.
They're not giving an inch here, are they? I mean, they all know that we're slowly starting to run out of time for round number 1. But, man, they are really having a red-hot go. And this is exactly what we see after safety cars. Obviously, everyone's bunched up. They're all that little bit hungrier now because we know we're running out of time. And it really gets racy down the back of the pack here.
Sure does. Everybody working hard to try and maximise their points haul from round number 1 of the series. We've got just over 11 laps remaining. It's Richard Hampstead a bit further back in the pack. In fact, quite a fair way back in the pack. Position number 27 is where Richard Hampstead is at the moment. It started up in 12th, but the night's not gone according to plan for him so far.
And his teammate talking about he's now up 12 positions as Jake Maloney, so he's in P8. So it's all swings and roundabouts, isn't it, with these races? You just never know how it's all going to play out, whether it works in your favour or not. We've had that safety car that's really jumbled things up, and obviously people try different sorts of fuel strategy, but boy oh boy, coming down to these last few laps now, everyone is really going to start to get racy. Nice and close on exit there, and it's so easy to run out of room. We saw it, we spoke about that contact that Rosella had, and obviously got that penalty. It really tightens up on exit there.
Adam Briggs and Dylan O'Shea. Nice move from Wayne Burke. So he's got back ahead of Ethan Griggolt. He was behind Griggolt, but he's managed to get ahead of the Evolution Racing Team Commodore. Let's check this out on the replay. Griggolt a little bit wide coming out of the final corner. Burke just got better traction coming out of Sunset Turn and was able to get up the inside of Griggolt into turn 1.
Yeah, smart driving by Ethan too. He just sort of saw that he had the pace, just let him have the corner, and now it's just getting behind him and try to think about getting that position back off him.
Jake Maloney buying his way into the battle as well, as we see that Adam Briggs, Dylan O'Shea continuing their battle. This one going on for a little while between these drivers. Rick Kuznetsov just in behind them as well. Out the front, Madison Down leads the race by 0.36 of a second, so Brady Myers has got a bit of time back on his teammate. James Scott staying well and truly in touch with the race leaders as well, so less than a second separating the top 3 cars.
Now, I know with most of the teams, they will be in communication with each other as far as, you know, how they're going to race each other. But I think at this point, for round number 1, these guys are pretty much racing. They're not going to be moving over or just taking it easy for the next few laps. And you can see Down, he's moving around trying to break that draft. And it causes a bit of a snake effect because everyone knows what he's trying to do. So it's really good to see that these TTR guys are really having a red hot go. They're racing hard, and that's what we're going to see right down to the checkered flag.
I'm going to put it out there, and I'm going to say that it's a race of 5 now. I think the top 5 cars have probably got enough of a buffer over the rest of the field that the winner is going to come from one of these 5 cars. So Madison Down, Brady Myers, James Scott, Andrew Gilliam and Jake Burhan. And then it's almost 4 seconds back to the next group of cars where you've got Burke, Griggolt, Maloney. Roselle is still hanging on in 9th position, but under a bit of attack from Brenton Hobson at the moment. There's the visual idea of the gap. I think Rosella, if anything, is probably just settled down a bit now. Obviously, he lacked a bit of pace there at the restart, but now that he's got into a rhythm, he seems to be able to withstand the attacks from the cars behind.
I guess it comes down to he gets a bit of an understanding of how that car's feel, because obviously you know how good the car is when it's all straight, but when it starts to get knocked around, as the race goes on, you get a bit of an understanding of how the car is driving. So you sort of drive it to its means, and that's probably where you find him at the moment, where he knows he hasn't got a race-winning car now, so he's just sort of holding on the best he can.
And that's smart, because if you try and overdrive the car or battle too hard to defend your position against cars that clearly have more pace than you do, it's a losing battle, and ultimately you can end up getting turfed off the road a la Jared Filsell, and you end up with no points. So I mean, salvaging the points for 9th position for Luke Rosella It's better than trying to fight for a 6th or 7th when the car's not capable of it and ending up 20th or worse as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're exactly right. You know, this top 5, they have started to open up that little bit of a margin. Although these guys aren't giving up, though. It's a good little battle between this mob, but it's funny when you start to see those groups start to separate a little bit. They know the laps are starting to wind down, and you will find that the drivers' mindsets change a little bit. They know realistically whether they're going to be in a position where they can win this race or not. And it's not a matter of settling. It's a matter of just understanding where your car's at and what points you can grab to make the most of a night.
Exactly right. Brenton Hobson now trying to find his way past Luke Rosella, but at the same time, got a bit of pressure from behind from Tom Freer, who, like I said, has recovered pretty well. He qualified 9th. He slipped well down the order for a while, but he's now coming back into calculations for a top 10 finish. You have to be so precise, don't you? The thing about a long race like this one, and remember it's over 250 Ks, closer to 260 Ks, just the level of concentration to make sure you get the braking markers exactly right, that you get the turning points right, that you apply the throttle fast enough to get good exits from the corners, but not too fast that you spin the rear wheels, and having that discipline to get it perfect lap after lap after lap. That's one of the real challenges, mental challenges of sim racing. As we say, that Hobson has made the move through on Rosella. So Rosella now starting to look a bit vulnerable in these closing laps. Through as well goes Tom Freer, and Rehan Leonage up on the inside of Luke Rosella now as well.
It's a helpless situation, isn't it? When you know your car's just not good anymore and you just start dropping like a rock, it's just like, oh, it's so frustrating to know that he was a leader at this stage. Obviously, you know, before pit stops, that second round of pit stops, he was leading this. So, you know, he had his woes as far as a penalty, but that car, as damaged as it is, he just hasn't got much to race with, unfortunately. So he's just trying to hold on the best he can. But, yeah, it's a sick, sick feeling.
Yep, shame for Luke Rosella. There is Rehan Leonage carrying one of our onboard cameras tonight, and Leonage again maintaining concentration, but at the same time looking relatively relaxed behind the wheel of the number 79 machine.
Yeah, that's brilliant from him to be in that position and to be as relaxed as he looks. I mean, that's really good. I mean, I find myself when I'm driving and I find myself in a racing situation, I do get sort of all wound up a little bit. I get up on the wheel, but to see his relaxed driving style, that's going to benefit him as his sim racing career goes on, because just having that style, it's different to see him driving one-handed, but hey, if it's working for him, then that's great.
Here are the 5 cars battling it out for the race victory tonight. 7.5 laps remaining in this one. At what point do you think that Brady Myers will start racing his teammate for track position?
I think he's already starting to think about that. Obviously, they're all pushing on. He's probably starting to think about where his car is possibly better than Madison's or not. We obviously spoke about how crucial the draft is down that back straightaway, so he'll be trying to put himself in a decent position where he's right up on that bumper and then try to get that little bit of draft. And obviously, Madison's not going to make it easy for him. He is going to hold his line, and you know, he'll move across over the racing line and try to break some of that slipstream. But I think what Brady Myers needs to do is just get himself in a nice position towards that back straight and hopefully get a little bit of that draft and get the job done.
Here's the next battle of cars. Wayne Burke, Ethan Grigault, Jake Maloney. They've all separated out into their own battle group as well. They've pulled away from the cars behind that did spend a fair bit of time caught up behind Luke Rosella.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, a bit further back in the mid-pack, Hayden Bell, Blake Warboys, Kurt Stenberg, who's come up 16 spots. In terms of the driver who's made up the most spots tonight, though, that would be Jack Boyd, who has come from 40th on the grid up to 21st position for a gain of 19 places.
It's not bad. It's a fair effort considering what we've seen tonight. It's been good, hard racing throughout the entire field, but to find himself in that position and where he is at the moment, that's a great job.
As we see that Ethan Grigault has got back ahead of Wayne Burke. So these two cars have swapped positions on a couple of occasions. Grigault now back ahead.
They're just slowly starting to lose touch, aren't they, with that top five? You called it. You said it was going to be a battle out of those top five. But to find themselves sort of 6 odd seconds back from that main group, obviously there was a little bit of things that played out for them. They were racing each other. And, of course, when the front leaders or the top five are all single file, you start racing in the pack, they do start to pull away. And, obviously, they got into their dramas there when they lost a bit of pace when they were behind Rosella as well. So all those things have played into it. He finds himself in 6th place, but just off this lead bunch, and you can see Madison down now trying to open up that gap to half a second.
The only thing that could allow Grigault, Burke and Maloney back into the contest is if these top 5 cars all start dicing frantically for track position and slow each other down, which we saw it last year, didn't we? When Phil Sell and Burton were battling for the win, they were side by side for multiple laps in a row. And in the last couple of laps, they slowed themselves down so much that it invited 3 other cars into the contest.
Absolutely, and that's what you've got to be mindful of. You can see these guys snaking down that back straight. They're trying to break that toe, but absolutely, if you get caught up and you race the guys around you, you start to forget about the group that's behind you. All these guys need to do is stay single file, because if they do get racy, they will close up those laps exactly like you mentioned that we saw last year.
So a bit of self-discipline required here, and the drivers really need to work together rather than working against each other. They need to think about how do we drag ourselves up to the group of cars ahead. But the problem is that Ethan Grigault is not gaining on these 5 cars. In fact, he's losing time to the tune of 4/10 to half a second a lap.
What do you think's the mindset's going through with James Scott and Andrew Gilliam? They look around and they can see all these TTR cars starting to gang up. They've got TTR cars in front. They've got Burton behind them. It's just, they know that they've got their work cut out for them. But when you've got teammates, that sort of raises the level playing field sometimes too, because you know that they're probably talking with each other. And are they trying to do a bit of strategy to help Burton? They're obviously down in that, are not slowing down to bring Burton in there. Burton's got decent pace, and now he's just trying to position his car to try and get past Gilliam and then Scott.
Feels at the moment like this is all just building up to something. So these cars have been line astern for quite a while now, but we're starting to get to the business end of the motor race. There'll be 5 laps to go when they cross the start-finish line next time around. And I just get the feeling that that's in the final 5 laps. That might be when we start actually seeing some drivers sending it down the inside and making some moves.
Absolutely. I think it's been good, smart racing from these guys too. They know that they've just pretty much gone single file. They haven't battled each other too much at the start of this race, because what they've been able to do is open that gap over to Ethan Grigault, and now that takes that little bit of pressure away. That they know as they get to sort of 3, 2, 1 laps to go, they know that they can battle between them and not worry too much about that second chasing back.
We just saw their news for race control. The number 143 car of Jordan Ross is going to get a 5-second time penalty for an incident with Harrison Dengate, and that's the second penalty that he has had this evening. Also, a bit of other news from race control is that Jordan Ross and Luke Rosella penalties were not considered served, as they were taken under safety car conditions. So because the pit stops all happened under safety car, you can't serve a penalty while the safety car's out. So that's just going to rub salt into the wound, particularly for Luke Rosella, because he already stops longer than he needed to during the pit stop, and he's going to have a further 5 seconds added onto his race time at the end, which, given how tightly bunched the field is, that's going to be a fair old number of positions that he's going to drop once that 5 seconds gets applied post-race.
Oh, it's a tricky one, isn't it? But look, at the end of the day, if that's what's in the rule books, I mean, you just got to go by it. Unfortunately, yeah, that's when you start to think about how your race can unfold like that. You know, you find yourself in a decent position, you get caught up in a drama, you get a penalty. Then, of course, when safety cars come out, it just adds insult to injury. So, unfortunately, he just needs to push on, try to gap whatever he can in the field, and then if he can try to stretch those margins out, hopefully he can hold on to another couple of spots. But we won't really know that until the checkered flag comes out.
Down and Myers have really pushed on in the last lap or so because they're opening up the margin to the cars behind. It was less than half a second before. It's now almost a second between Brady Myers in second and James Scott in third position. So the Trans-Tasman teammates working together to build the gap over third place. And it's shaping up more and more. And it's going to be a battle between these two now, you would have to say, for the race victory.
Yeah, you say that, but again, if these guys start battling, it doesn't take much from, if they get a little bit side by side, how close that Scott, Gilliam and Burton are, they can be right in the fold before you know it. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out over the next few laps, but boy, oh boy, they are starting to push now, but they'll be thankful of that little bit of a margin.
There's some wounded cars out there, aren't there? One of the Evolution Racing Team cars, Bailey Frid, with the rear wing missing altogether. And we see the car of Matthew Bolton getting down the inside of Sebastian Flock. So a trio of Evolution Racing teammates duking it out. Contest for positions 28, 29 and 30.
Jordan Ross too, spouting some damage. You're right, it's not something that we normally see a lot of damage like this, but man, oh mate, everyone has been having a red hot go, and yeah, a couple of panels missing off that rocket, so it's not going to be the best thing to drive. You'll be glad that this race is over shortly.
Yeah, and more penalties coming his way, although being down in position number 34, it's not going to make a massive difference to his finishing position in the final analysis. Anyway, another driver who will be quite happy to forget about tonight and look ahead to the next round.
Now that margin now with Down and Myers, they've got that out to 1 second, so there's not a lot in it, but lap 41 of 44, it's really going to be great to see how this all plays out. It's good to see how strong Myers is too. He's really taken it to his teammate. Obviously TTR have done some pretty good testing leading up to this race. They're fairly happy with their race cars, and most of their TTR cars have been sort of there or thereabouts most of the night. Really good to see from a team point of view, and this will be strong for them going forward as the season goes on.
Certainly will be. So 3 laps remaining next time around. Look at all of the waving that you can see. You could see it there at the back of the shot with Ethan Frigold as the drivers just try and break the toe from the car behind on the back straight.
Yeah, race drivers are greedy, aren't they? They'll take whatever they can get. If there's a little hint of a sniff of a draft, you'll take it. Doesn't matter what there is. You know, if it's just that tiny little bit, you'll gladly take that, because it just makes that job just that little bit easier to try and get closer to the car in front.
And so here's that trio of cars battling over positions 6, 7 and 8. Grid Galt, Burke and Maloney. Jake Maloney, for mine, one of the best performances of the evening, coming from 20th on the grid to be up inside the top 10.
It's not bad, is it? 12 spots under his sleeve. Like, that's pretty good. Again, another one out of that TTR stable. So it looks like they've hit on something pretty good for this round. And yeah, that's going to make them obviously a strong outfit for all the racing that they do, regardless of what series they take part in. So, you know, we saw throughout last year how strong TTR are, and there's no doubt they're going to be strong again this year. Are you game to call it? Are you game to say that it's just going to be down to Madison Down and Brady Myers at this stage?
The margin's a second between Myers and Scott, so yeah, I think it's a case of and then there were 2 at this point. Only just over 2 laps to go, so overtaking opportunities and time running out.
it's a nice position as a driver for these two. Obviously, you know, they're having a red hot go, but to know that they're slowly just starting to eke that margin out behind them, they know that they can sort of concentrate, sort of eyes forward. It'll be pretty silent on the radios, I think, between these guys now, and especially within the team. They'll just let these guys battle it out, but it's going to be very interesting. Look at the ground that he makes up under brakes too. So really happy with his car, really putting that pressure on Madison down as we start lap 43.
Here we go. So Brady Myers, I think, has decided that it is time to attack. So we've got 2 laps to go, and he is right in the draft of Madison down as they head down the main straight into turn 1. You can see that he was closing in, but just runs out of straight to pull up alongside Madison down. It does seem like Madison Down's car around the back part of the circuit is maybe just a little bit better balanced compared to Brady Myers. He seems to establish just a little bit of a margin. Brady Myers, if he wants to win this race, he's going to have to get a good run onto the back straight, I think, and be close enough to be right in the slipstream. But being teammates with Madison Down, you would have to say that it's not going to be an over-enthusiastic move, and if anything, he's probably going to rely on Madison Down making a mistake.
Sometimes the downfall of racing against your teammate is that they know your weaknesses too. So everyone knows each other really well. They know each other's driving style. So they've probably got a bit of an understanding of where each other are probably going to make the move. So that is one of the disadvantages of racing a teammate. Is these guys still, they got Ethan Goodgold. He's got his work cut up for him. Burke's going to try around the outside. Is he going to get the job done? Maloney's back there watching. He's waiting for this to unfold because he knows if these guys come together, he can sneak 2 positions out this. But really hanging on the outside now. Can Ethan hold on? He's now to the inside. It's switching around.
Oh, this is great racing between these two drivers as Griggold runs Wayne Burke out of road. And he's now going to be vulnerable to Jake Maloney, who comes up on the outside, sweeps around. Griggold just manages to hold on to it. And coming into the contest now as well is Tom Freer. Big loser out of all of that was Wayne Burke. Dylan Rudd has picked up a spot as well to move up to 9th position. Burke getting shuffled back to 10th. Jake Maloney up to 6th.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And that's exactly what he did. He sat back and saw those guys racing and he was able to snaffle both positions. Oh, he's left himself open up the inside though. Greg Gold's going to get that move done. He probably should have closed the door a little bit, but he's going to sneak up the inside. Nice little move there from Maloney. Well done. He's got to worry about his exit. Can he get the job done? Thought there was going to be an over-under from Greg Gold, but nice driving there from Maloney.
And now he has to stay to the inside of the circuit because Griggold will be right in the slipstream heading down the main straight. He brakes late, he brakes deep, and he holds it nice and tight. Jake Maloney parks it at the apex to make sure that Griggold can't switch back. But here he comes, good run, and he'll be on the inside for the next right-hander. But then the outside for the left-hander as Maloney checks him up on the exit.
Yeah, brilliant driving there for Maloney. He knew exactly where Griggold was going to put that race car. He just closed the door a little bit and now his eyes forward. He just wants to get a good exit and try to push away from that. But he's really good and happy to take those 2 spots when those guys were fighting. Griggold still got his workout cut out for him because Freer's all over him now.
And Wayne Burke would like to get some of those spots back. Dylan Rudd, Brenton Hobson, even Luke Rosell is still holding on grimly in position number 12, albeit with a penalty coming his way after the race. So it's really bunched up the field from 6th down to about 12th or 13th position. Here, though, come our Trans-Tasman Racing teammates. What a stellar performance it's been. They have really controlled the race all night tonight. Madison Down, particularly in that opening stint where he just drove away from the field. An exemplary performance where he did not put a foot wrong. And he is just keeping his teammate Brady Myers at bay on this final lap.
Yes. Oh, nice exit there. He was trying to get the exit down, trying to use that power. He was got that mid-corner speed. He was really having a red-hot go. That was his last-ditch effort to try and get as close as he could to Madison Down to sneak that draft. But I think Madison's done enough. He's been strong all night, and it looks like he's going to hold off his teammate Brady Myers.
Beautifully controlled performance from the front of the field by the Trans-Tasman Racing duo. Madison Down, a nice tight line out of the last corner, making sure that he gets the exit accurate. He has controlled the race from the front all night long, and he wins round number 1 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series at Sebring Raceway. Myers making it a 1-2 finish for the Trans-Tasman team with James Scott home in position 3. Andrew Gilliam 4th, ahead of Jake Burton. Back then to Jake Maloney in 6th position. A great performance from him, up 14 spots from where he qualified. Ethan Grigol, Tom Freer, Wayne Burke and Dylan Rudd rounding out the top 10.
How good of a race was that towards the end? But Madison Down really did the number on the field tonight. It was good racing between teammates with him and Brady Myers, but a strong effort from TTR. We've got 4 cars in the top 6 for Trans-Tasman Racing. As you can see the cars on screen. Brilliant job from that team, and no doubt a strong start to this opening round for the 2023 season.
I'll tell you what, you couldn't get a more contrasting start to the season, could you? Last year it was Jared Phil-Sell, who was the series champion and right in the fight for victory all night. Tonight, Jared Phil-Sell out of the race early on with an incident, and Madison Down, who didn't even start the race due to a blackout, comes home as our race winner tonight to kick off his title campaign with maximum points.
It's always a good feeling, isn't it, too? Yeah, for him to bounce back like we touched on, you know, obviously not the best starts for last year, but he's really maximised, he's put it on pole, he's led this race for pretty much all of it, and been very strong tonight. No doubt this is a good feather in his cap for the start of his 2023 campaign, but really good to see, and he'd be absolutely thrilled with that, and no doubt, you know, you touched on how Phil-Sell started his championship compared to Madison last year. Well, maybe Madison's hoping that there's a championship trophy waiting for him at the end of 2023, but a long way to go with round 1 under our belt here at Sebring.
Indeed, and for round number 2 we head to Phillip Island, another fast flowing circuit for what will be the second round of the series. That is coming your way on the 19th of April, so make sure you stay tuned to all of the Logitech G Pro Invitational Series social media channels for all of the news and updates in the lead up to Phillip Island, and also wrapping up all of the action from tonight as we see Madison Down doing some celebratory burnouts on the cool down lap.
I just enjoyed it now, knowing that he's won round 1. The turn-in race Apparel Sebring sprint is under his belt now, and what a race. Dominant style, and got the job done over second place Brady Myers, James Scott in 3rd, Andrew Gilliam in 4th, and Jake Burton, a nice bounce back for Jake. You know, we didn't speak about him much tonight, but to him to finish in 5th place, that's a brilliant job.
Indeed it is for Jake Burton, up 8 spots. Qualifying obviously didn't go according to plan for him or for Andrew Gilliam, but they both managed to fight themselves from outside the top 10 into top 5 finishing positions. So they might not have quite got it together in qualifying, but they certainly had the race pace. Confirmation of your race results on screen. A few drivers having tough days at the office. It was looking so good for Luke Rosella for so long, but ultimately finishes outside the top 10 and gets a penalty as well. But the big news, race retirements for a couple of our key players. Jared Phil-Sell out of the race with crash damage, and Josh Anderson also retiring after starting the race from the back of the grid. Both those drivers coming away with 0 points to kick off their 2023 season campaigns. Reminder of the calendar for the 2023 Logitech G Pro Invitational. So Phillip Island the next round. We'll also head to Spa, Road America, Watkins Glen, the Red Bull Ring in Austria, Belle Isle, and a couple of endurance races coming up later on in the year, the Sandown 500 and the Bathurst 1000, where we'll have co-drivers sharing the cars with the series regulars. And then the title will be decided at Road Atlanta on the 15th of November.
Yeah, brilliant calendar there, some great racetracks, and we're going to see so many different things play out throughout the year. I think 2023, we've already seen it's been some good hard racing, and I think we're in for a stellar season. A great mix of drivers. We've seen so many new names joining our series as well, and that's just another feather in our cap for our championship, and no doubt we're going to be stronger as the year goes on. I can't wait to see what other racing and how these battles play out over the year.
Shaping up to be a good one, isn't it? Certainly, if tonight's been a preview of what's to be expected, then we are in for a ripper of a season. The quality at the front of the field is very strong, and it sets us up with some interesting storylines for the rest of the season, with a couple of key players finding themselves in positions now where they're going to have to try and recover some lost ground in the points. As I mentioned, the likes of Jared Fuel-Cell and Josh Anderson, how effectively they can fight out, it's going to be one of the big stories. And speaking of that incident for Jared Fuel-Cell, here's another replay of it. The night had already been a very orderly one for our reigning series champion, but that was the moment where it finally came to a sad and sorry conclusion.
Yeah, you just see the condition that race car's in. Obviously, it was just awful to drive for him, and his night just got from bad to worse. Contact there again as well, so heavy damage to that car, which saw us have our first safety car of the night. But no one in their wildest dreams would have picked our series champion from last year to be our first casualty of the race, I guess, with a safety car. And for his night to end the way it did was, it's definitely heartbreaking for him. But you could just see he had his battles all night long, just the way that car was.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he sustained some damage in the early laps, and he fought to try and hold on with the wounded car, but it just got worse and worse and worse, and ended up in a situation where he was plummeting down the field, and in the end, like I said, fighting, trying to persevere with a damaged car can ultimately end in disaster, and that's exactly what happened for Jared Fuel-Cell. So very shortly we'll be catching up with our top 3 finishers from tonight, just waiting for them to make their way into our media centre for the post-race podium presentation, and almost like a press conference, isn't it, that we do after each race. And in fact, we'll start off with the driver who finished in 3rd place tonight after a really consistent performance, starting on the front row of the grid for the Synergy Sim Racing team. Congratulations to James Scott. James, a good solid night for you and plenty of points in the bank to kick off your 2023 title campaign.
Yeah, that's it, mate. It was pretty tough out there. Car was pretty good in the first stint, but I think it just went away from us a little bit once the track rubbed up and cooled off as well. But anyway, I can't complain too much about P3. Definitely a good way to start the year off.
How did you find the car was in race conditions? Obviously, it was fast in qualifying, but it looks like that off the start you got shuffled back a couple of positions.
Yeah, the car wasn't, as I said, in the first stint it was pretty good. It was just in the first stint, those first few laps, didn't really know how it was going to play out with the draft. No one really wanted to lead with the draft being that strong. But Madison got away a little bit. I think the guys in P2 had a little bit of a battle, and he got a gap, and that really set up his race. But yeah, no, I was just conserving the first stint. But then when it sort of opened up a little bit, the car felt good. Just lacked a bit at the end there.
In the last stint after that safety car, do you feel that you had enough pace to maybe challenge the 2 Trans-Tasman guys at the front, or were you more at that stage focused on just preserving a podium result?
Yeah, I was looking forward to those guys, but I think they were pretty quick, and I just made a few mistakes and they got a bit of a gap, and from there it was going to be pretty hard. But yeah, we'll have to tune her up a bit and see what we can do in the next round.
And finally, James, before we let you go, who gets it done for you off the track? Who would you like to thank tonight?
Yeah, obviously all the guys at SSR. They put in some good work this week, and the car was pretty decent. So, and obviously all our sponsors, Watercraft Performance Centre, Parramatta Isuzu, Dr. Epoxy, Works Racing, and obviously you guys for the great broadcast and the series admin as well.
Congratulations, James. Well done on a great start to the season. There he is, James Scott, 3rd place tonight. In 2nd place tonight for the Trans-Tasman Racing team, please congratulate Brady Myers. And Brady is going to have a chat to Sandman.
Congratulations, Brady. I think you've got a bit of a love affair with this place, don't you? You know, considering what you went through last season, and then to run as strong as you were, it was a great battle to watch between you and your teammate Madison Down.
Yeah, I seem to have a good relationship with this place. It's been nice to be the last 12 months, but no, really good race. Didn't really want to battle Madison too hard, just knowing that James was behind and ready to pounce whenever. But apart from that, we, as a team, we executed that race pretty much to perfection. Pretty happy with how the race went.
And your pace was good at the start. Obviously, you were just picking them off one at a time. Obviously, when the grid is all bunched up at the start of the race, you found yourself up 6 positions. So put yourself in a good stead towards the end of this race with that battle with Madison.
Yeah, absolutely. Just made some progress in the congestion, and managed to sneak out the other side and pop out in second. So I was really happy with how that happened, and I probably didn't have it as much for Madison as I would have liked. He was just that little tenth or two quicker.
That was my next question, because all the TTR cars actually looked really good. So your lead up to this race obviously looked pretty good with car preparation and the pace that we saw out of all the TTR cars. So I was wondering what you had left and how crucial that draft played down the back straight.
Yeah, draft was massive. Our preparation hasn't been too intense. We've kept it pretty lax, but no, everyone put their heads together and we came up with a pretty good race car. I think we all a few of us went in different directions with setup, but overall I think we were pretty happy. Just didn't have the pace and quality, just lacking that couple of tenths or so on the other guys.
Before we let you go, is there anyone you thank? Obviously, a good start to the season and put you in good stead for the rest of the year, but is there anyone you'd like to thank before we say goodbye?
Yeah, of course. Just like to thank everyone at Trans-Tasman Racing. Really pulled together in the last few days, and really stoked with the team result. Obviously, with Jake in 5th and Maloney coming up 14 spots or whatever it was. So yeah, really good effort for the team. To my personal sponsor, Extreme Motor Trimming. Awesome to get to be with Year 3 with those guys and to get another massive result. Just awesome. To Virtual Racing School, thank you. To Card Effects, Ethan and Blair. Tim, TP Race Design, thank you, Tim. And to you guys for the broadcast, thank you.
Awesome stuff. Mate. Thank you, Brady. And taking the round win tonight for the opening round of the Logitech G Pro Invitational A-Series, a commanding performance from pole position to the race victory. Let's have a big round of applause, everyone, for Madison Down. And Madison, what a contrast. Last year, this time 12 months ago, you were sitting at home in the dark. You couldn't race. You couldn't even watch the race because you were blacked out. Tonight, you stand on the top step of the podium. How are you feeling?
Yeah, amazing turnaround. I'm over the moon with that. Actually, had a big fist pump as I crossed the line. Just so good to start 2023 on that positive note with a pole and basically a lights to flag win there. So yeah, car was mega. We talked before the race about the speed, not knowing about how good we were going to be in the race, but the car held on really well. Strategy played out perfectly, so it's nothing like a perfect plan and then executing it, I guess.
In that first stint, it looks like you were cruising because you were just opening up the gap over the rest of the field little bit by little bit. But then obviously we had a safety car that coincided with the second round of pit stops. Did that put you under any extra pressure, having the field bunched up like that?
Yeah, 100%. I went from a position where I was able to manage the gap and manage the race, manage tyres, fuel, all of those things, to all of a sudden having everyone right under my rear wing for that safety car restart. So it definitely wasn't what I wanted to see. Everything was panning out much more stress-free until that point, but it put the pressure on me. Thankfully, I was able to keep doing nice, consistent times and not end up with any mistakes and letting anyone pass. So yeah, really, really good result.
Your teammate Brady certainly kept the pressure on you all the way through to the checkered flag. Were there any sections of the track where you thought they might have had an advantage over you?
Yeah, we seemed really, really close overall. We were on a very similar setup, Brady and I, little differences, but overall it looked like I was able to get off the corners a little bit better than what he was, particularly the low speed corners. So I knew that if I could keep managing to do that lap after lap after lap and open that 10th or 2 on each corner exit, I'd be okay. It was just a couple of those laps there where I made a little mistake or lit the rear up off those corners and you didn't have the gap there as the safety net. So it was really just a matter of that last half an hour, 35 minutes, just one corner at a time, one braking zone at a time. Just make sure you nail every single corner, because the one you don't will be the one that Brady gets up the inside of you. And there wasn't a lot of talking happening between us. So I know we were working together as a team and he could have been probably a little bit more aggressive, but if he got a sniff at the win there, I'm sure he would have taken it as I expected him to.
It was certainly entertaining having you both fighting it out so hard for victory in that closing stint. Now, not sure if you heard, because I know that when you're racing, obviously you're in your own bubble and sometimes you don't really get to see or hear what's going on in the rest of the race, but a couple of the key championship contenders, Jared, Phil Sell and Josh Anderson, were both DNFs tonight, so it's a bit of a twist or a turnaround from what we saw last year, where you were the one with the DNF and then having to fight your way through for the rest of the championship. So how does that make you feel, knowing that not only you've won the race, but you've also obviously given yourself a bit of a head start over a couple of the other main players?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously feels good from where I sit, but unfortunate for Jared, he really had the race from hell there to start the championship, and yeah, it really is a flip from last year, where he was very dominant throughout the year, and you know, he didn't win the first race last year, but he was up there, and I had no points to my name. So this year, of course, other way around. Jared's a strong competitor, though. He's very fast week in, week out. You know, there's still a long way to go going through this year. A lot can happen. So there's nothing to say that the same thing can't happen to Brady or I, for example. So just got to keep rocking up, make sure we play it smart, make sure we're fast every race. And yeah, in the end, speed looks after itself, doesn't it, in terms of results? So that'll be our aim.
Absolutely. If you can be fast, if you can qualify on pole position and put yourself up the front and out of trouble, that's definitely puts you a long way towards winning races and winning the championship. Sandman, did you have any questions for Madison?
I think you covered it. No doubt, Mad, you'd be pretty happy with that. And it was a good performance from all TTR cars. I think we touched on a little bit with Brady that I think you guys really put your stamp on of authority as far as the team here at Sebring. All the cars looked pretty good.
Yeah, and it wasn't the same setup across the board either. So there was 2 or 3 different setup directions going. All of those directions look like they've worked. I mean, Jake on his return with the team up 13th to 5th there in the top 5. Maloney 20th to 6th. You know, a lot of success stories even for Stenny, 35th to 18th. That's massive. So a long way up from where they started, all the way across the board. So yeah, really good team result. We looked like we had a pretty good car on the long runs compared to others around us. So yeah, really proud of everyone. You know, fair amount of work goes in behind the scenes to get the car up to speed. So a lot of data analysis on virtual racing school as well through the week, the last few days. So yeah, really awesome to see everyone start the year on a bit of a high, except of course, Josh Anderson had a bit of a shocker, but apart from that, the team overall had a reasonable night.
And so finally then, Madison, who would you like to thank? Who gets the job done for you off the track?
Of course, Virtual Racing School. Not only are they a team sponsor, but personal sponsor of mine, and I do a lot of work in terms of coaching. Actually, I've done about 5 coaching sessions in the last 2 weeks at this circuit in this car, so nice to know potentially the advice I was giving was the right advice. So from that point of view, really cool. We use that software day in, day out to make each other faster, make each other better, just that constant analysis of those squiggly lines. So really awesome. Card Effects with the Warren family there. Extreme on Brady's car does a great job, as well as, of course, all the other supporters we've got. So yeah, really cool. Tim Pattinson as well, caught up with him at Newcastle, and he, of course, did deliveries for the car. So thanks to everyone.
Awesome stuff, Madison, and congratulations on a sensational performance to kick off this year's Logitech G Pro Invitational Series. So there we go. There are our podium finishers tonight. Madison Down, your winner. Brady Myers coming home in 2nd place, and James Scott in 3rd place overall. Sandman, final thoughts on this evening?
These teams will now have a chance to go back, think about how their race played out, and well, what they've got to do is now start putting their race together for Phillip Island. It's a big, long season, but it's good to see that some of these teams are already on the front foot, put a decent result together. It's been a great race, and I really can't wait for Phillip Island.
Yeah, bring it on. Phillip Island for round number 2. That is coming your way on the 19th of April. Hope you have enjoyed all of tonight's coverage. A big thank you to the team at the Australian Sim Racing Group for all of the organisation that goes on behind the scenes for the series. Big thanks to our broadcaster at Lucas Esports as well for broadcasting all of the action. Big thanks to Motorsport Australia for coming on board to help with the broadcast for the Logitech G Pro Invitational Series this year as well. And to our round sponsor, Turn In Race Apparel, a big thank you for your support. Hope you have enjoyed all of the action. Sandman, I've enjoyed working with you once again. And Cass, it's been some fantastic action that we've seen tonight in the opening round of the Logitech G Pro Invitational. Hope you've enjoyed all of the action as well.